Chapter 3195. A second later, Lu Yin's injuries were completely healed, and the blood-red figure returned to his sword raised high. Although he was confused, he didn't care. If one strike wasn't enough, another would do the trick. However, as the sword fell, the blood-red light dissipated from the tip and spread to the entire sword, then the arm and finally the entire figure. The figure looked around in confusion, and his gaze finally landed on Lu Yin's face. They looked at each other, and before he disappeared, he made a gesture for silence. He seemed to be smiling. The blood-red light disappeared from the mirage. Everything returned to normal. The mist slowly drifted and the river of time flowed. It was as if everything that had happened here was just an illusion. Lu Yin quickly ran over to Hongyan Mavis, Sr. Hongyan Mavis was lying on the ground, her body dyed red with blood. Lu Yin quickly helped her up, Sr. Hongyan Mavis looked bitter. Sorry, I couldn't help you. Lu Yin shook his head. No one expected this. Hongyan Mavis looked at the sky in a daze. I didn't believe what you told us about the lost clan. There's no such thing as an omnipotent existence. Even when Master was at his peak, he wasn't omnipotent. We disciples can still resist. Now I believe you. She looked at Lu Yin with a serious expression. We've made a mistake. Lu Yin had the same feeling. That wasn't Tianfa. Tianfa, punishment on behalf of the heavens. That might have been Tianfa, Hongyan Mavis said. Lu Yin felt bitter. Tianfa? The corpse god had been waiting for so many years, creating the hell of the giants Tianfa and the omnipotent existence that the lost clan spoke of. All signs pointed to such an existence behind this boundless universe. An existence that could easily erase humanity. This wasn't good news. Lu Yin and Hongyan Mavis looked over and saw that it was the star toad. He had been injured by a single strike, and it hadn't been a light one. Underground, the star toad's short legs trembled as he looked at Lu Yin and Hongyan Mavis. Look at what you've done. Lu Yin looked at the star toad and asked, Are you seriously injured? Nonsense. The star toad was about to curse, but he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Hey, what are you doing? Lu Yin stood up. You've helped the everlasting clan more than us, haven't you? That's for business. Today I'll make a business deal with you as well and buy your life. With that, Lu Yin used the reverse step and rushed towards the star toad. He wanted to use this opportunity to kill the toad, as he had wanted to do so for a long time. The star toad's multicolored body suddenly darkened as it swung its pitchfork and leapt into the air. Brat, don't think that I'm easy to bully. Business is business, and those who mix personal feelings deserve to die. It then stabbed its pitchfork towards Lu Yin. Even though it seemed to be heavily injured, Lu Yin still felt a sense of crisis. The dead toad was pretending to be dead, so its injuries weren't as serious as they looked. At this moment, Hongyan Mavis couldn't help Lu Yin. He wasn't confident that he could kill this toad in a duel. Thinking of this, he suddenly stopped. It's a losing deal. Let's not fight anymore. The star toad swept past Lu Yin's side in an instant, and its body instantly turned gold. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The star toad's eyes narrowed into crescents. You're wise, Boss Lu. Lu Yin smiled. Of course we're comrades. The star toad glared at him. Hey kid, can you not bring that up? Tianfa's death has nothing to do with me. Are you trying to pin the blame on me? Lu Yin stared at it. Just tell me if you did anything to Tianfa. The star toad gritted its teeth, wanting to stab Lu Yin with its trident, but it wasn't confident. While it had passed bitter adversity, it was at an absolute disadvantage in the transcendent progenitor realm. It had only reached the primordial realm because of its special race. In terms of strength, it couldn't compare to the current 3 realms and 6 Daoists. Even if it reached the primordial realm, it still couldn't compare to the 4 guardians or the ancient gods. Passing bitter adversity didn't give it any advantage either. The only way to surpass everyone was to pass bitter adversity and reach the eternal realm. It glared fiercely at Lu Yin. It knew that no matter what it did, this brat would still draw the ire of the 4 guardians onto itself. Since that was the case, it turned to Hongyan Mavis. What happened to the path to the immortality realm? Where is it? Tell me. Hongyan Mavis sneered. You think you're worthy? The star toad was furious. I risked my life to help you deal with Tianfa, and you're going back on your word. You were forced to do so. The conditions weren't met at all, Lu Yin said naturally. Hongyan Mavis quickly followed up. But I can still tell you. The star toad wanted to continue cursing, but it froze when it heard Hongyan Mavis' words. Its attitude immediately changed and it put on a naive look. Go ahead. Hongyan Mavis' gaze turned cold. Promise me one thing and I'll tell you. Don't worry, I'm not asking you to deal with the Guardians or the Eternal Realm. Gu Yizhi and the others are something you can do easily. The star toad grew wary. What is it? Hongyan Mavis said, no matter who asks you about Tianfa's death, you're not allowed to say a single word. The star toad opened its mouth and looked at Hongyan Mavis in a daze. You're too cunning. Lu Yin was flabbergasted. He hadn't even thought of such a condition. Hongyan Mavis was too cunning and she was trying to force the star toad to their side. I won't agree. Impossible, absolutely impossible. If the Guardians ask me, there's no way I won't say anything. The star toad immediately refused. Hongyan Mavis sighed. Then there's no other way. You should know that you rejected our offer of the path to immortality in exchange for helping us deal with Tianfa. It was only when Little Seven used your collection to force you that you agreed. Am I right, Little Seven? Lu Yin looked at the star toad seriously. Business is business and I can't help you. That's right, I won't touch your collection and it'll still be yours. As for the path to immortality, it's not fated with you. But you still have a way out. The star toad stared at Lu Yin. Lu Yin grinned. Force us. The star toad rolled his eyes. Although Hongyan Mavis was heavily injured and Lu Yin was a half-step ancestor, there was still something off about this situation. This brat had actually dared to directly face him, someone who was trying to cross the bitter adversity, and had even dared to use him to scheme against Tianfa. The star toad suddenly thought of something and pointed its pitchfork at De Heng's corpse. You already knew that I was the one who sent De Heng to the Six Directions Society. Lu Yin sneered. You think you can deal with me with an idiot? Toad, aren't you underestimating me? The star toad gritted its teeth, itching to revive De Heng before killing him. This bastard had been completely toyed with by Lu Yin. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The star toad would rather not enter the Mirage domain than participate in the killing of Tianfa, especially since that blood-colored figure had truly terrified it. It knew that this matter had reached the heavens. Forget it. That's enough. Now you either know the path to immortality and truly pass the bitter calamity, where everything is beneath you, or you can face it yourself. If Tianfa dies and you take action, the protectors of the Four Directions will be able to find out, and we can even reconstruct the entire process. You won't be able to escape. Of course, no matter which path you choose, your collection will still be yours. I know where it is, but I won't touch it. You can move it yourself and you can choose which path to take. The star toad felt aggrieved. This was too much of a scam. Were humans this sinister? The Eternals were still the ones that were easy to get along with. Why did they have to be so sinister? The star toad was extremely conflicted as no path would work. It would definitely be targeted by the protectors of the Four Directions. It would definitely be targeted by the protectors of the Four Directions. Cough, cough. The sound of coughing came from the distance and Lu Yin and the rest looked over in surprise. Those from the second anima had actually survived. This was something that Lu Yin had never expected. Under Tianfa's area of effect attack, even the Heavenly Emperor card had almost been unable to withstand it. The star toad's lotus leaf had also been shattered and they should have all died by now. How had they survived? He had clearly seen them die and that pool of blood had been extremely exaggerated. In the distance, Second Purple was weakly lying on the ground. Beside him were the clearly shattered Second Bone, Second Meng and Second Kindness. They were all sitting on the ground, panting heavily. Their bodies had obvious signs of being pieced back together, proving that they had indeed been shattered. Interesting. This must be some sort of innate gift, Hongyan Mavis praised. Lu Yin stared at the few from the second anima. These people had committed all sorts of crimes and their deaths were not to be regretted, but they were not completely useless. With a bang, the star toad stabbed its pitchfork into the ground and glared at Lu Yin and Hongyan Mavis. Tell me the path to immortality and I swear that I won't say anything. I won't say anything about Tianfa's death. Hongyan Mavis nodded. A wise choice. The path to immortality lies in. Not long after, the star toad left with a heart full of resentment and helplessness as it distanced itself from Lu Yin's group. It had decided that it would never leave the Mirage before breaking through to immortality. So what if the protectors of the Four Cardinal Regions were here? Could they find the Mirage? There would no longer be a creature like it in the universe. Gone, completely gone. It seems like it's not planning to leave the mirage in the future, Hongyan Mavis said. Lu Yin laughed. That's good too. It's caused too much trouble for us in the past, so it'll be quiet from now on. If I want to find it, it has to come out. I still have a stone that can enter the mirage. Hongyan Mavis frowned. The problem is that even if you want to use it, it has to be able to walk out of the Forbidden Zone alive. I've already told you how terrifying the Forbidden Zone is. It wouldn't be strange if it died in there. Lu Yin's heart skipped a beat. Is there really a path to immortality in the Forbidden Zone? Hongyan Mavis nodded. That's what Nyonyo told us. I'm telling the truth and I'm not lying to it. Even if I did, it would be Nyonyo. Lu Yin realized that Hongyan Mavis was a little two-faced. With the star toad gone, Lu Yin turned his attention to the few from the second anima. They looked at him as well. The second anima was still in the Emperor card, but Elder Dangu had fainted and could not be released for the time being. The fog of time spread and the few from the second anima were on high alert. They quickly moved closer to Lu Yin. Lu Yin walked towards them. End of chapter. Chapter 3196. Ergu stared at Lu Yin and stepped in front of Meng and the others. Master Lu, please forgive us if we offended you. Shan felt a chill all over his body. This man dominated this place. He could feel how terrifying the blood-red liquid and the star toad were. But this man had dealt with them all. He was indeed the sect master of the above heaven sect. Even the extraterrestrials didn't dare to provoke him. Lu Yin glanced at them. I've heard about your deeds. You deserve to die. Ergu was vigilant. Master Lu, cultivation is fighting against the heavens and everything in this world. We're just cultivators. Lu Yin put his hands behind his back. I don't plan to discuss this with you. You're unlucky to be involved in this war. I didn't let you leave the auction because what you did made me think that I could kill you all. Ergu and the others became more vigilant. Lu Yin gave them too much pressure. But now I've changed my mind. Everyone has the right to live and you're right. I have no obligation to avenge those who died at your hands. It's just the law of the jungle. However, since I'm strong and you're weak, I have the final say in your lives. There shouldn't be any surprises, right? Shan said. Master Lu, we're at your disposal. Lu Yin praised. Smart guy, I heard that you have a strong sense of danger. You've been watching me during the auction. Since you knew it was dangerous, why didn't you run away when we entered the mirage? You should know that if you followed me in, the chances of survival would be slim, especially you. Lu Yin looked at Ergu. I didn't notice you. You're here to... Ergu's voice was weak as if he was on the verge of death. The five of us will live and die together. Shan gritted his teeth. No matter how dangerous this place is, my third brother was caught by you. We had to come in. Ergu said, Master Lu, please let my third brother out. What if I say that your third brother is dead? Lu Yin asked casually. Ergu and the others' expressions changed drastically. Their eyes suddenly became vicious as they stared at Lu Yin. Shan clenched his fists. Master Lu, please kill us. Otherwise we'll avenge our third brother. Second Meng and Second Violet both stared at Lu Yin with undisguised killing intent. Lu Yin laughed. Killing you is as easy as lifting a finger. There's no rush. Perhaps he's not dead yet. They knew that their lives would be in this person's hands in the future. It was an unbearable feeling, but they had long since expected it. They knew that the five of them would die one by one sooner or later. Lu Yin looked at Second Purple. Your innate gift is very unique. Second Bone continued. Fifth Sister's innate talent is community of destiny. In other words, as long as she fixes a person as her template, if that person doesn't die, we won't die either. If that person doesn't get injured, our injuries will also recover. Lu Yin was astonished. There's such a talent? Does it work on anyone? Second Purple weakly replied, Of course not. The greatest limitation of this innate gift is that it can only be used on a specific person. The first person I used it on was eldest brother. Soon after, second sister, third brother, fourth brother, and even myself were all targeted. It's very difficult to increase the number of targets. Lu Yin understood. No wonder they wanted to protect you even when they were about to die. You also entered the mirage at the last moment. As long as you're alive, they'll be alive. No wonder Second Life is so notorious, but you still haven't died. The others looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. So what if they didn't die? Becoming someone else's puppet was no different from death. but they had no other choice. They had heard the conversation between Lu Yin and Star Toad, and even Star Toad had been forced not to speak of today's events. They knew then that they had no chance of freedom. They could either completely obey Lu Yin or die. There were only two options, and they didn't have the qualifications to bargain with Lu Yin. Lu Yin had his uses for these people from Second Life. These people had killed too many people, and even if they died it wouldn't make up for anything. Besides, Lu Yin had no obligation to take revenge for others, especially strangers. Since that was the case, having these people do things for him that were inconvenient for him or even for Elder Chan would be considered a contribution to the human race. The above heaven shouldn't be like the above heaven in the past, completely exposed to everyone. Back then, the above heaven had been extremely dazzling, and thousands of races had come to pay homage to it. However, because it had been too bright, it had been destroyed by the Eternals. Right now, Lu Yin needed the above heaven to be dazzling on the surface, but he also needed a blade in the shadows. Second Life was just the beginning, and he would continue to add hidden experts. He had already thought of his next target. These hidden experts would have a title: Zhong'an. Once they entered the mirage, they wouldn't be able to leave so quickly. Previously, Lu Yin had regretted that he hadn't been able to cultivate Ruin's consciousness to the point where he could easily use it. Now he could only hope that time would be able to heal the damage to his consciousness planet. The Violet Emperor's consciousness had helped his consciousness planet recover quite a bit, but it still hadn't fully recovered, and it still needed time to heal. After some time, Elder Dangu woke up. Although he hadn't died, his injuries had been too severe. The Royal Regent's power had severely injured Tianfa, which had shocked Lu Yin and the others, but it had also exceeded the limits of what Elder Dangu could unleash. From now on, the Heavenly Emperor card is considered useless, and I can no longer use any of the statue's power. Otherwise, my fate would be even worse than today's, Elder Dangu said bitterly. Lu Yin comforted him. It's fine. Once we get out, I'll help you upgrade it to the level of an ancient card. Elder Dangu's mouth fell open. Was it that easy? He couldn't refute that. Since when did ancient cards appear as easily as cabbages? But I'll say this in advance. You guys will pay for your own resources. The amount of resources I'll use to upgrade your Heavenly Emperor card is equivalent to half of my wealth, Lu Yin reminded him. Elder Dangu smiled and nodded. Then Dao Lord, can you upgrade it to a higher level? Lu Yin glanced at Elder Dangu. Yes. Elder Dangu's eyes lit up. First of all, you have to prepare your own resources. There aren't many, and I'll start with a few quadrillions of star essence. Elder Dangu was speechless. A few quadrillions was a number that made his heart tremble. Second of all, do you have any experts who can use this card? If I'm not wrong, Elder Dangu, you'll never be able to step into the primordial realm. Lu Yin's voice was bleak. Elder Dangu couldn't even use the Heavenly Emperor card, and even if he switched to Aurora, he wouldn't be able to fully unleash its power. Even if he could connect to the primordial universe and breathe in that breath, he wouldn't be able to withstand the third step into the primordial realm. He had no fate with the primordial realm. Elder Dangu didn't mind. I know that I won't be able to step into the primordial realm. Actually, ever since I escaped to this space-time, I knew that the primordial realm was out of my reach. But Dao Lord, you've given me another path. Although I'm not in the primordial realm, I can still unleash the power of one. Thank you, Dao Lord. Lu Yin nodded. Recuperate well. You still have to face the remaining three. Divine punishment was perhaps the strongest of the four protectors. After all, it represented the heavens, and it couldn't be done without some strength. At the very least, Lu Yin felt that heaven's grace paled in comparison to it. Even if the remaining three couldn't compare to divine punishment, they wouldn't be too far off. They were all in the primordial realm, and if the blood-red figure appeared again after they were killed, Lu Yin wouldn't know how to deal with it. He had no idea how the crimson figure disappeared. He had only reversed time for 1 second. He knew how to reverse time for 1 second, and even knew how to deal with the crimson figure's attack. However, it was too difficult to do so. He only had the power of flowing light, which was beyond the river of time. If the blood-red figure appeared again, he had no confidence in dealing with it. This was the most troublesome part. Second had just been released, and he was currently in a corner with Second Bone and the others. They had also obtained the grass, so they no longer feared the mist. Hongyan Mavis had suffered quite a heavy blow. She had once been one of the peak powers of the universe, a legendary existence, yet she couldn't even block an enemy's attack now. She had finally seen the most deeply hidden existence of the universe. Little Seven, do you think the ones who attacked Master were really the protectors of the four directions? After staying in the mirage for a while, Hongyan Mavis found Lu Yin and asked about it. Her injuries would recover in the mirage. Lu Yin's gaze was complicated. They could surround and kill divine punishment, but with the progenitor's strength, would the protectors of the four directions be enough to deal with him? Not necessarily. Even the current above the heavens had the strength to directly face the protectors of the four directions, let alone when the 3 realms and 6 paths had been glorious. Back then, even if the 3 realms and 6 paths hadn't acted, the strongest existences in the 9 mountains and 8 seas should have been able to fight against the protectors of the four directions, such as Progenitor Qin and the Desolate Ancestor. There should have been experts like Progenitor Qin back then. However, the progenitor had mysteriously disappeared, and the first continent had been destroyed. This was a mystery of that era, and it remained a mystery even now. Lu Yin had met the progenitor, but he hadn't told him the reason. It wasn't until Black Wuxian told Lu Yin that the protectors of the four directions had surrounded the progenitor. But was that really the case? Lu Yin felt that things weren't that simple. Senior, don't think too much about it. Let's take it one step at a time. After I lost my memories, I went from an ordinary person to where I am today. I used to think that the Frostwave Weave was huge, that the outerverse was huge, that the innerverse was huge, and that the entire 5th continent was huge. But with every step I took, these worlds were surpassed. Now, we might think that these countless parallel spacetimes are huge, but there will come a day when we won't think so anymore. That day is very close. I feel like we've touched upon the deepest secret of this universe. Hongyan Mavis didn't say anything else. She wanted to break through to the primordial realm, and only then would she be able to face that existence. Her master had once warned them not to break through to the primordial realm unless it was absolutely necessary. Now Hongyan Mavis felt that it was time. That blood-red figure had caused her to feel an indescribable panic. It wasn't fear but the helplessness of seeing an unbelievable secret. This was something that could only be suppressed with strength. She would break through to the primordial realm. Chapter 3197. After an unknown amount of time, Hongyan Mavis had mostly recovered from her injuries, and Elder Dangu had long since recovered as well. Although he couldn't use the statue's power, he could still use the Heavenly Emperor card to resist a primordial realm expert. Second Life and the others had also recovered, but they couldn't leave the mirage and could only stay with Lu Yin. One day, a golden light flashed by and Lu Yin, Hongyan Mavis and Elder Dangu hurriedly chased after it. It was the Star Toad. The toad had gone to the forbidden area, where legend had it that the path to immortality was. Hongyan Mavis didn't even know if it could make it out alive, but now it had. Lu Yin was very curious about what the toad had gone through. The Star Toad's back was facing Lu Yin's group as it stared blankly at the river. The copper coins around its neck were scattered, and the wound left behind by the bloody figure was still bleeding. No matter how one looked at it, the toad's condition seemed to have worsened. Its back seemed a little bleak, as if it had suffered some kind of blow. Toad, are you all right? Hongyan Mavis probed. The toad's body swayed and leaned forward as if it was about to fall into the river. Lu Yin subconsciously wanted to push it away. Lu Yin, Hongyan Mavis and Elder Dangu tacitly didn't warn them. Although the toad was useful, its death wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Lu Yin had wanted to kill it several times already. Unfortunately, the toad only swayed a little and didn't fall into the river. Kai Hong, you're shameless. Hongyan Mavis was stunned and her expression turned ugly. You're scolding me, you stupid toad? The toad turned around and glared at Hongyan Mavis. So what if I'm scolding you? I haven't hit you yet. Come and try. Hongyan Mavis clenched her fist, shaking the void. The toad gritted its teeth and glared at them. There's no path to immortality in that shitty place. On the contrary, Lu Yin's group was curious. On the contrary, what? The toad's expression turned bitter. Instead, I saw my great-grandmother who died a long time ago. She wanted me to reunite with her, saying that many elders were waiting for me. He liked me a lot. Lu Yin blinked. What the hell? Hongyan Mavis replied naturally. Isn't that immortality? Your great-grandmother is dead. To be able to appear there and return even after death, what is it if not eternal life? The surface of the star toad's body turned into a multicolored color. It raised its pitchfork and glared at Hongyan Mavis. Lu Yin was on high alert. That damn toad wouldn't act out of desperation, right? After waiting for a while, it squeezed out 2 words, shameless. After that, it turned around and ran away, disappearing without a trace. Lu Yin gave Hongyan Mavis a strange look. Even Great Elder Gu was looking at her strangely. Hongyan Mavis coughed. Don't look at me like that. It has nothing to do with me. I didn't expect things to turn out this way. If I knew earlier, it would mean that I tricked it. I didn't trick it, or it would affect my breakthrough to the primordial realm. Lu Yin thought about it and agreed. So you're saying that fate lied to you? Hongyan Mavis had a headache. I don't know either. Logically speaking, Nyonya was very obedient back then. This was no longer a simple scam. This was clearly a scam. The star toad had been severely injured, but it was still better than Hongyan Mavis. Now that Hongyan Mavis had recovered, the star toad's injuries had worsened because it had gone to the forbidden area. If it had encountered an enemy at this time, it would have died without even knowing how it had died. If there was no such thing as a grudge, there was no reason for such a deep grudge. Logically speaking, Fate and Hongyan Mavis had followed the primogenitor to cultivate, so there shouldn't have been any deep grudges. Unless, Lu Yin looked at Hongyan Mavis. Hongyan Mavis also looked at Lu Yin. Did you think of something? Lu Yin asked. Senior, did you think of something as well? I did think of something, but I don't think so. Let's see if we think of the same thing. You write maybe, and I write impossible. Both of them wrote a word on their palms and raised their hands. Lu Yin wrote fake on his palm. Hongyan Mavis wrote real on her palm. What was real and what was fake? Their hearts sank as they realized that the universe that they should have known so well had become so unfamiliar. Great Granny, the star toad wailed from afar. Lu Yin sighed. It was time to leave. He could do it again anyway. In the main hall of the above heaven, Lu Yin took a sip of the tea that Zhao Ran had brewed for him. Bai Ni and the other 4 stood in front of him. The 5 of them kept quiet out of fear, not daring to say a word or sit down. Lu Yin put down his teacup. The auction went smoothly. Congratulations. Bai Ni hurriedly bowed. Fortunately, we had the support of the above heaven. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to hold the auction. The item would have disappeared before the auction even started. Lu Yin laughed. It has nothing to do with me. Besides, I was the one who caused the trouble in the end. You must be joking, sir. That has nothing to do with you. You didn't even go to our auction. Qingdu smiled. Bai Ni was stunned and looked at Qingdu in surprise. What did he mean? Lu Yin had gone to the auction and attacked Second Life and the others. This was publicly known and they weren't stupid. How could they not have seen it? They had come this time for 2 reasons. First, they wanted to give the wisdom root to Lu Yin, and second, they wanted to ask for forgiveness. After all, they hadn't participated in that battle, and they hadn't thought that Lu Yin wouldn't be at the auction house from start to finish. This idea was foreign to them. What difference did it make whether Lu Yin was there or not? Bai Ni didn't know, and neither did honored Master Yangjiao or the Luofu King. But why would Qingdu say this? This was clearly separating Lu Yin from the auction. Why would he do this? Why was he so sure? Bai Ni looked at Lu Yin and saw his faint smile. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he looked at Qingdu with disbelief. Was this all part of Lu Yin's plan? Qingdu looked at Bai Ni. Isn't that right, brother Bai Ni? Bai Ni narrowed his eyes and looked deeply at Qingdu. Qingdu winked at him. Bai Ni sighed. Yes, Master Lu has never been to the auction. Lu Yin looked up and sized them up. I know why you're holding the auction. Humans are ambitious. I can help you, but you have to do me a favor. Bai Ni bowed. Please speak, Master Lu. Lu Yin replied, find someone qualified to represent you and become one of the 8 outer Daoists of the above heaven. Bai Ni was stumped and put in a difficult position. The 8 outer Daoists were not weak and they had seen the scene of Emperor Zhaowu. Whether it was the Emperor of the Limitless Empire or Heir Ji of the Disaster Expedition, none of them were easy to deal with. These people all had the strength to face off against the second anima. There were too many parallel universes in the outer realm, and these parallel universes had no experts besides the second anima. Where would they find someone to join the above sky sect? Lu Yin didn't care if these universes wanted to ally with him. He wasn't that overbearing, but dealing with the Eternals was an unchanging plan. Whether or not these people joined forces, they had to participate in the war against the Eternals. In fact, he hoped that these alien civilizations that posed no threat to him would join forces. He didn't need the above sky sect to manage them, and he could mobilize experts to participate in the war with a single word. It would be a pleasant surprise if he could find someone qualified to become one of the 8 outer Daoists. Regardless of whether or not he could find them, the above sky sect had no time to worry about them. Bai and I and the others took their leave. Old Zen smiled. These fellows are all cunning. They want to see our above sky sect join the parallel universes and become stronger. We even beat the Eternals until they don't dare show themselves. Dao Master Emperor Zhou showed us the powerful side of humanity, but it also awakened some people's ambitions. Luin didn't care. It's a good thing to have ambition. Only with ambition can one have the desire to improve. I'm afraid of no ambition. That's a disaster. He raised his hand, revealing the root of wisdom that Bai Ni had given him. He had bought the root of wisdom from the auction house at a high price, hoping to get closer to Luin. Old Zen also took out the root of wisdom that Bai Ni had given him and handed it to Luin. I've already reached the peak. Breaking through to the progenitor realm was a pleasant surprise, and I can't take another step forward. I'll leave this root of wisdom for you, Dao Master. Luin didn't decline. Many thanks. Outside the above sky sect, Bai Ni and the others looked at Qingdu with unkind eyes. On the surface, it seemed that Bai Ni had been the one behind the auction, but in reality, it had been Qingdu who had suggested it. Now it seemed that Luin had obtained what he wanted through the auction, and they had to hide this fact. The one who had truly benefited was Qingdu. Brother Qingdu, what benefits did Luin give you? Bai Ni asked. Why did you go through so much trouble to set up the auction? Esteemed Yanga and the others stared at Qingdu. We also want to know. Qingdu laughed. Everyone, don't be angry. Luin didn't give me any benefits and he couldn't have come to me directly. It was old Zen who came to me. I didn't help the above heaven for the sake of benefits. I just wanted to rely on them. Everyone, think about it. Don't look at us as powerhouses who control the life and death of countless life forms. We don't dare to deal with a mere second anima. There are too many powerful life forms in the universe, and who can guarantee that we won't run into them? I just want to survive. What guarantee did the above heaven sect give you? King Luofu asked coldly. Qingdu smiled reservedly. 1 life. They'll save my life this time. Bai Ni and the others sighed in admiration. It's a no-cost deal, but it's worth it. Seeing their ugly expressions, Qingdu said, actually, as long as we're willing, we can join the above heaven sect. They'll treat us the same. Bai Ni frowned. He couldn't join the above heaven sect. He had his own ideas, and the most important thing right now was to find a card that could support the 8 outer paths. But where could they find such a card? Even if they could, the above heaven sect might not even bother with them. That was troublesome. Luin had been waiting for Tian'an to appear, so there was no way it wouldn't know. He didn't have to wait for long. Looking at the giant butterfly in the sky, he walked out of the above heaven sect. Master Lu, may I ask where Tian'an is? Tian'an's voice was as gentle as ever, but he would never forget that she had killed the desolate ancestor. If not for her, he wouldn't have gone into hibernation. Chapter 3198. How would I know where Tianfa is? Luin denied everything. Tianfa is dead, Butterfly said. Luin was shocked. Tianfa is dead? Daoist Master Lu, you don't know? How would I know? I was just about to ask where Grand Elder Dangu and the Lost Tribe went. Butterfly flapped her wings and hovered in space. Dao Master Lu, you should know that Tianfa's death is no small matter. Someone needs to take on the responsibility of the protectors. With Tianfa's death, a hole has appeared in this universe and it will cause a disaster. Luin agreed. I understand. How about this? I'll help you find someone to replace Tianfa. Dao Master Lu, I'm not joking. I'm not joking either. Do you think that I'm the Dao Master of the above heaven sect? Butterfly fell silent for a moment. I hope that Tianfa's death has nothing to do with you. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the consequences. Luin sneered. It has nothing to do with me, but I'm not afraid of threats. Don't try to pin this on me. I think that the Eternals are the most suspicious. Right, what about Fengbua? There's no trace of him. According to the Eternals, he's also dead. Do you think I'll believe that? We've talked about this before. The Eternals must have hidden Fengbua. If you have the ability to keep an eye on us, why don't you keep an eye on the Eternals? I'll say this. If you don't find Fengbua, Don't even think about touching anyone from the Above Heaven sect. Leave, the starter space doesn't welcome you. Butterfly left, wanting to investigate Tianfa's death. Logically speaking, if Tianfa had died in this universe, she should have been able to find out. However, Tianfa had not died in this universe, which was the biggest problem. Where had Tianfa died? Lu Yuan walked out from behind Lu Yin and spoke in a suppressed voice. A good war denouement was ruined by these four. We've achieved our goal, but we won't be able to start a war against the Eternals in the shortest time possible. Our morale will plummet. Lu Yin replied, it's fine. The war denouement is just a demonstration of the human race's strength. As long as we can get rid of these obstacles, I'll officially start a war against the Eternals. When the time comes, we'll raise the human flag. That will be the decisive moment. Ancestor, have you ever thought about what other changes have happened to Fate after it returned from the mirage? Lu Yuan was surprised. Why do you ask? There are some things that need to be verified, Lu Yin said. Lu Yuan pondered for a moment. It's been too long. I can't remember, but there shouldn't be any changes. Otherwise, Master would have noticed it. This was his biggest doubt. Lu Yin looked up into space. How could a progenitor not have noticed the change in destiny? If destiny had not changed, then Lu Yin's conjecture would not have been valid. But then why would destiny use the path of eternal life's forbidden zone to scheme against others? No matter how he looked at it, it was contradictory. Even though he had reached such a high position, there were still layers of mysteries in the universe that needed to be uncovered. However, up until now, the biggest problem was still the Guardian envoys. Butterfly was very certain that Tian Fa was dead. As long as she found evidence of Tian Fa's death to his hands, she would immediately work with the other two primordial realm experts to attack the Above Heavens sect. From how she tried to kill the desolate ancestor, it would not be long before that happened. Perhaps what she was doing now was just a facade. The Above Heavens sect had to deal with the attacks of the Guardian envoys at any time. If the Guardians of the Four Directions were to attack Above Heaven, the Eternals would not. If they joined forces, then the Above Heaven sect would be in trouble. Lu Yin thought about it. Now that he had regained his consciousness, there was no harm in going into seclusion again. This time he would deal a heavy blow to the Eternals. The only true God had a turbid treasure, and he could indeed use the dark space to attack Lu Yin's consciousness. However, Lu Yin would also be on guard and he would not be able to move that quickly. This time he did not need to memorize everything, only efficiency. Just as Lu Yin was about to go into seclusion, someone's arrival startled him. It was Xianxia, Starsabil's grandfather. Starsabil would never have dreamed that she would run into a scoundrel like Xianxia in the Above Heaven sect. Xianxia also did not expect to run into Starsabil in the Above Heaven sect. Long time no see, grandniece. As an elder, Xianxia felt that he should greet her first. However, his greeting attracted a cold glare from Starsabil. Xianxia did not feel awkward and merely laughed it off. Lu Yin arrived and looked at Xianxia strangely. You actually came looking for me? When Xianxia saw Lu Yin, his originally smiling face suddenly became incomparably miserable, as if he had been abandoned. He wailed, Brat Lu, no Dao Lord Lu, Master Lu, you have to help me. As he spoke, he moved to hug Lu Yin. The second Night King raised a brow and casually pushed Xianxia back. Impudent. Lu Yin waved a hand to dismiss the second Night King. He then looked at Xianxia's miserable expression and asked curiously, what happened? Were you bullied in the Six Direction Association? Xianxia bitterly replied, it's not the Six Direction Association. It's fate. Lu Yin's gaze trembled. Fate. Starsabil stared at Xianxia's back. Fate was now a dark cloud looming over her head. In order to break through to the progenitor realm, Fate's daughter had scattered the technique of fate and forced it onto Starsabil and Skyminder. She had thought that she could avoid the calamity of fate, but in the end, it had still been taken away by fate and transformed into a string. This had been a huge blow to Starsabil and she no longer dared to cultivate it. What happened? Lu Yin anxiously asked. Xianxia was helpless and he sighed deeply. I was despicable. I clearly knew that I shouldn't cultivate it, but I still cultivated the Xiantian mirror. In this generation of the Starsabil sect, I was the second person besides senior brother Zhu to successfully cultivate the Xiantian mirror. But after I succeeded, I felt that something was wrong. Senior brother looked at me strangely, and I had a premonition that a great disaster was about to befall me. The more I cultivated the Xiantian mirror, the more I had this feeling. Especially when I tried to use the Xiantian mirror to pry into fate, that sense of danger almost made my scalp explode. With no other choice, I fled the Starsibyl sect and went everywhere to read people's fortunes. I specifically did the opposite and wanted to break free from the Xiantian mirror's divination of fate. After so many years, it has indeed shown some results. Although my reputation isn't very good, at least I no longer feel that sense of danger. But. Xianjiu looked at Lu Yin sorrowfully. A while ago that feeling appeared again, and it was even stronger than before. It was as if I saw a hand grabbing at me and a giant mouth about to swallow me whole. Dao Master Lu, you have to save me. For the sake of our many years of friendship, I've helped you before, haven't I? As he wailed, Xianjiu wanted nothing more than to hug Lu Yin's leg. He was not going to leave, not even if he was beaten to death. In the past he had felt that Lu Yin was an ominous person, but now this ominous person had become his life-saving straw. Lu Yin stared at Xianjiu. Where is that feeling coming from? Xianjiu felt a chill. It's everywhere. Specifically, if I can't find it, it means that it's everywhere. Walking, eating, sleeping, she's everywhere and she's always watching me. Can you imagine that no matter what you're doing, there's always a pair of eyes watching you? A hand is constantly approaching you and you can't escape even if you want to. In front of you, behind you, everywhere is a pair of eyes. It's an inescapable misfortune. Enough. Starsibyl shouted, her face deathly pale and her eyes filled with fear. Xianjiu looked at Starsibyl. Grandniece, I'm just making an analogy. There's no need to be so cooperative. Lu Yin looked at Starsibyl and he saw that she was truly frightened. The Starsibyl who had once been as calm as still water, who had observed the young elites of the universe and schemed for the future, was nothing but a child in front of Destiny. Destiny's daughter's fate terrified her, and Lu Yin was also bitterly disappointed. Ancestor Lu Yuan, Hongyan Mavis, the ancient gods and the 3 realms and 6 Daos had all appeared, and Lu Yin was no stranger to these legendary existences. However, Destiny still gave him a chilling feeling, as if it was different from Ancestor Lu Yuan and the others. You once said that I'm an inauspicious person. You saw the future and anyone who gets close to me will not have a good ending. Since that's the case, why come looking for me? Lu Yin asked. Xianjiu sighed. I won't hide it from you. Possible I would rather die than get close to you. But there's no other way. If I don't get close to you, I'll definitely be swallowed up by Destiny. Getting close to you might give me a chance at survival. The sect above heaven is so powerful now, and the 3 realms and 6 Daos have joined us. Even if Destiny is reborn, it should be afraid of this place. Lu Yin looked deeply at Xianjiu. This time Xianjiu calmly met Lu Yin's gaze. If not for his tattered clothes and the broken wooden pole in his hand, this scene would not have been too out of place. So you're asking for protection, Lu Yin said calmly. Xianjiu smiled. You can say that, but there's another explanation. I'm here to help you sense destiny. Lu Yin's brows rose. That's a good explanation. Then you can stay. Xianjiu relaxed. Thank you so much. Zhao Ran, bring some tea. Lu Yin sat down on a stone bench and gestured for Xianjiu and Starsibyl to sit. Xianjiu looked into the distance and saw Zhao Ran. His eyes widened. Why is she still here? Lu Yin was not surprised. Zhao Ran and Xianjiu both had problems and he wanted to use Zhao Ran to force out Xianjiu's problems. He still remembered what had happened when he had first seen Zhao Ran. Zhao Ran had said that she would always be able to find Xianjiu. Xianjiu had also said that he could never avoid her. The two of them had some sort of connection, and Zhao Ran was related to destiny. Lu Yin could see the laws of destiny manifesting on her body. Ah, it's you, kind fortune teller. Zhao Ran was very happy to see Xianjiu. Xianjiu naturally did not feel happy at all, and his expression was even uglier than if he had cried. You still remember me? Zhao Ran apologized. Although I'm lacking, I will try my best not to forget those who treat me well. Especially you, kind fortune teller. I'd rather you forget about me. Xianjiu was helpless. Lu Yin looked at Xianjiu and then at Zhao Ran. Alright, let's sit down and talk. There are some things that need to be clarified. Xianjiu sighed. Master Lu has good eyes. I admit that avoiding you is related to this girl. She's related to destiny. Lu Yin was not surprised, and neither was Starsibyl. Zhao Ran was definitely related to destiny, but they did not know what that relationship was. Chapter 3199. After the desolate ancestor had awakened, Lu Yin had asked Lu Yuan to ask him, but the desolate ancestor had only given him one answer. He did not know either. He only knew that Zhao Ran was waiting for someone and he had seen Zhao Ran when he was young. When he became the desolate ancestor and saw Zhao Ran again, Zhao Ran was still the same. It was at that time that he knew that Zhao Ran was extraordinary, but he did not know what was so special about her. She walked the world, lived forever and had even lost her memories. If she did not have any expectations, she would have died a much more comfortable death. On the stone table there were 3 cups of hot tea that emitted a green aura. It looked strange, but those who knew Zhao Ran knew that the tea had been brewed very well and was progressing in a good direction. The first time I saw this girl, I knew that she was related to destiny. At that time I did not think about destiny and only thought that it was a problem with the Xiantian mirror. Starsibyl interjected, "You thought that it was Mr. Zhu's problem?" Xianxia scratched his head. Indeed, who would have thought of the legendary destiny back then? The Xiantian mirror made my scalp go numb, and I thought that Senior Zhu was scheming against me. You all know how sinister that guy is. Even his smile is abnormal. This girl made my Xiantian mirror react, and I thought that Senior Zhu had sent her to cause trouble for me. I tested her a few times, but she actually lost her memories. Although I might have been able to find the problem with the Xiantian mirror through her, the longer I interacted with her, the stronger the sense of danger became. That's why I left to avoid her, but I never thought that she would find me every time. He's really out of stock. Zhao Ran nodded in agreement. Yes, I'm out of stock. She did not understand the rest, but the word out of stock was deeply ingrained in her bones. You all know what happened after that. This girl followed you and I tried my best to stay away from you. Actually, I don't know much about her and I just don't want to interact with her. It was obvious that he was telling the truth this time. Lu Yin did not plan on learning too much about destiny through Xianxia. After all, Xianxia was just someone who had cultivated the Xiantian mirror and was not a powerhouse. Even mending Tian was more valuable than Xianxia, and Xianxia's only value was that sense of danger. If one wasn't a powerhouse, they wouldn't be able to find out Fate's whereabouts just by having a sense of danger, and that sense of danger wouldn't let them know the secret. Xianxia moved closer to Lu Yin and flashed a fawning smile. "Master Lu, please send that girl away. I feel uneasy with her here." Lu Yin then said, "She can make tea here. What can you do?" Xianxia looked strangely at the green tea in front of him. "You call this tea?" Just like that, Xianxia stayed in Above the Sky sect. He had made up his mind not to leave. He had no choice. He didn't feel safe once he left Above the Sky sect. As for Zhao Ran, she was obviously more useful than him. 10 days later, Butterfly appeared again and asked about Tianfa. Lu Yin repeated the same words and even used Fengbo to annoy her, which angered her so much that she no longer spoke gently. A few days later, Butterfly appeared again, still asking about Tianfa and threatening Lu Yin. Lu Yin brought up Fengbo again and he told Butterfly Tianan to use Fengbo's head to talk to him. Otherwise he wouldn't waste any more time. Butterfly had no choice but to go to the first zone of disaster. "Tianan, I didn't lie to you. Fengbo is indeed dead. Actually, there are only 4 protectors and it's impossible for you to manage the entire universe. Most of the time you just run into one. If Fengbo wasn't dead and you found out, I would have handed him over to you, but he is indeed dead," the one true God said. Butterfly flapped her wings. "Tianfa's death is no small matter. Eternal, I need you to help me investigate." "There's no need to investigate. Lu Yin did it," the one true God said directly. Butterfly said, "Of course I know that. In the current universe, only Eternals and his Above the Sky sect can deal with Tianfa. However, I want evidence that justifies my actions against the Above the Sky sect." The one true God clasped his hands behind his back. Cultivation has always been about the law of the jungle. Since when did evidence matter? When the 2 sides are equal. You think that the Above the Sky sect is equal to the protectors. Otherwise, why would Tianfa die? Then what do you want to do? Butterfly was silent for a moment. "I need the Eternals' help." "It's my duty," the one true God agreed. Even the 6 paths of reincarnation realm's Grand Empyreans could not hear their conversation. She was very curious about the protectors as these 4 were not simple. On the other side, at the Above the Sky sect's back mountain, Lu Yin looked at the chessboard in front of him and frowned. Across from him, Wang Wen was confident of victory and he looked very confident. How is it, chess pathmaster? I've won this round again. Lu Yin praised, as expected of the smartest person in the Outerverse. Your chess moves seem to be tight, but in reality they are all linked together. Your moves can change endlessly, but they are still the same. I'm impressed. Wang Wen was pleased. That's right. When it comes to cultivation, even 10,000 of me can't compare to you. But when it comes to chess, hee. Chess pathmaster, you still need to learn. Lu Yin shook his head. All right, I've lost. Wang Wen put down his chess piece. The existence of the protectors puts our above the sky sect in a passive position. Even though one of them has died, the remaining 3 are very likely to stand with the Eternals. Once they join forces with the Eternals, it'll be a disaster for us. Chess pathmaster, are you considering this? Lu Yin replied, I can't not. Wang Wen stood up and looked at the chessboard. All intelligent creatures have one thing in common. Apprehension. Apprehension comes from personal gains and losses. If they become enemies with the above sky sect, even the protectors of the 4 paths will have to weigh the pros and cons. They can't directly attack us as they still have the responsibility that has bound them for countless years. Unless they are certain that Tianfa's death is related to us, and they have evidence that we can't refute. Seems absurd. Would a mighty primordial realm powerhouse need evidence to attack anyone? However, this is proof of our above-the-sky sect's strength. If Ancestor Lu Yuan hadn't broken through to the primordial realm, Ancestor Hongyan Mavis, the 3 Yangs, 6 lords, and the 8 paths, then the protectors of the 4 paths would have no need to worry. Lu Yin looked at Wang Wen. So, you're saying that we shouldn't become a topic of ridicule? The chess path lord is already doing that. What I want to say is that we should be wary of them asking for help. The ones who understand humans the best are the Eternals, and the ones who are most likely to find out that Tianfa died to the chess path lord's hands are the Eternals. Only the Eternals can frame us. What the protectors of the 4 paths need is an excuse that they can trust, Wang Wen said indifferently. This was not some great principle, nor was it some ingenious scheme. It was very plain, but sometimes the more complicated something was, the easier it would be to do it. The Eternals? Lu Yin had always been wary of the protectors of the 4 paths, so he had never attacked the Eternals. The more he did that, the more likely the Eternals would become involved in the matters between the protectors of the 4 paths and the above sky sect. Because the protectors of the 4 paths were just too dazzling, Lu Yin had actually forgotten about the Eternals. How could he let that happen? The true enemy would always be the Eternals. Actually, Lu Yin had already been prepared to enter seclusion and cause trouble for the Eternals with his Dai's possession. After all, he had recovered his consciousness and he was on guard against the only true god. However, Xianxia had come. After staying in the above-the-sky sect, Wang Wen wanted to play chess again, so Lu Yin played with him. Since we're done, I'll be leaving. Lu Yin stood up and left. Wang Wen was puzzled. Chess path lord, where are you going? Seclusion. Looking at Lu Yin's back, Wang Wen smiled. He hoped that the above-the-sky sect would truly reach the peak. He had walked out of the tiny iron bloodweave and he had seen just how vast the outside world was. However, that was not enough. He wanted control, even if it was just helping this person control it. The smartest person in the Outerverse. No, he wanted to be the smartest person in all parallel universes. Right, it's about time. You should know what to do, right? Lu Yin's voice grew further and further away. Wang Wen was vexed. Don't make me do this. It should be way wrong. It's so troublesome. Still, the chess path lord is becoming more and more sinister. Lu Yin arrived at his seclusion room and raised his hand, causing his die to appear. He hoped that Wang Wen would not disappoint him. He tapped out and the die slowly spun. 3 possession, which could be used to upgrade something. However, Lu Yin was very disappointed that he had no more money. He continued and tapped out another. While Lu Yin was in seclusion, a piece of news spread in the outside world, and it quickly reached the point where everyone knew about it. This news was that the Star Toad had killed Tianfa. The outside world did not know of Tianfa's name, but they knew that the Star Toad had killed a ball of blood-colored liquid in the Mirage domain. As for who had spread the news, no one knew, and no one knew the specific details. The Eternals wanted to help the butterfly find the truth behind Tianfa's death, but no one believed this news. The butterfly once again arrived in the first calamity domain. Can't be the Star Toad. Don't be fooled by its bitter adversity. You should know how strong it is. It is not a match for Tianfa, only true God said. Butterfly said, "That's why I came to find you." During the 100 Martial Universes auction, Shangu of the Lost Clan was the first to enter the Mirage domain, followed by that person called Deheng. After that, Second Life and Tianfa went in, but they never came out. I have 2 questions. First, how did they know how to get to the Mirage domain? This is a secret that we know, but not many of you Eternals know. How did Shangu know? Only True God said, it could be the records of the above heaven. Don't forget that the Lu family's inheritance has never been severed. That's possible. Second, even if these people worked together, they were not a match for Tianfa. In the end, none of them came out, including the Star Toad. I'm sure that Tianfa is dead, but what about the others? Eternals, I hope you can help me investigate. Only True God looked at Butterfly. I'm sure that Lu Yin went in as well. I'm sure, but it can't be used as evidence. We cannot casually attack the above heaven. We have restrictions, Butterfly replied. I'll find evidence for you. It's not the first time we've worked together, only True God said. After Butterfly left, only True God looked at the land of disaster. The truth was very clear. Tianfa had died at Lu Yin's hands. He knew this, and so did Tianan. The difficult part was that Tianfa had died in the Mirage domain, which prevented them from investigating the truth. The protectors could not casually attack the above heaven, or they would have done so long ago. They needed a reason to destroy the above heaven. Today is Freewine's birthday. Thank you, brothers, for your support. Chapter 3200. On this day, Lu Yin watched as the die slowly stopped at 6 pips. His eyes lit up, he had finally rolled it. In the dark space, there was an extremely bright ball of light in the distance. Lu Yin rushed over without hesitation, as such a bright ball of light definitely represented someone at the 7 sky gods level. The barrier blocked him, but it could not stop Lu Yin, who had completely recovered his consciousness. He easily crashed through it and merged into the ball of light. The moment he did so, he felt a familiar sensation. It was the ancient god. Lu Yin did not hesitate and slapped himself in the head. Lu Yin. The one true god's voice rang out. Lu Yin's palm landed, and with a bang the world spun. He exited the fusion and appeared in the dark space. Behind him, a large square seal rushed towards him. Lu Yin hurriedly returned to his body and dodged it. This time his speed was much faster because he was prepared for it. In the first zone of disaster, the ancient god spat out a mouthful of blood and squatted down, panting heavily. What was going on? Not far away, the ancestor frowned. It's Lu Yin again. The ancient god's eyes flickered. So this was what Lu Yin wanted to do by injuring himself. The one true god's voice rang out. Pass down my orders. No one in the race is to act rashly. Split into groups of 2 and one will act while the other will stop him. Understood, true god. Everyone bowed. In the 5th zone of disaster, the 4th zone of disaster, and so on, the eternal cultivators were split into groups of 2. The ancient god was naturally in the same group as the ancestor. Aside from the ancestor, no one else could immediately stop him. The ancient god clutched his forehead. It's fine. Even if he controls my body, it'll be difficult for me to kill myself. At most he'll injure me once and I'll recover quickly. A turbid treasure, a creation of the universe. It's truly mysterious. Even you were injured by it, the ancestor sighed. The ancient god calmly sat down and did not speak. The ancestor faced him. Atop the black mother tree, the one true god was helpless. Lu Yin was not letting the Eternals move. If he could escape the one true god's suppression once, then he could do it a 2nd time or a 3rd time. Any eternal expert could be controlled by him and commit suicide. Even if they did not die, if too many were injured, the heavens above would attack. Unless the guardians of the 4 cardinal guardians intervened, the Eternals would be in danger. A single turbid treasure was enough to put the Eternals at a disadvantage. He could only hope that Bai Wuxian would be able to find evidence that Lu Yin had killed Tianfa, which would allow the protectors of the 4 cardinal protectors to legitimately attack the above heaven. In the above heaven, Lu Yin opened his eyes. It was another ancient god. Strange, as ancient gods had clearly broken through to the primordial realm. Logically speaking, with the huge gap between him and a primordial realm expert, he should not have been able to fuse with them. Right? Is it because my consciousness is too strong? Whether he could fuse with the primordial realm depended on his own consciousness. He had devoured Ruin's consciousness. Ruins was one of the 3 pillars, standing on the same level as Gu Yizhi. Even if Gu Yizhi broke through to the primordial realm, he could still fuse with Ruin's consciousness. But the time would be extremely short. In other words, even if the one true god did not interrupt him, he would not be able to stay in the ancient god's body for long. Lu Yin smiled as he watched the die slowly spin. He wondered what it would feel like to be hit by an ancient god's palm. Although it wouldn't be a serious injury, it wouldn't be much better. He didn't know who the next person would be, but the Eternals would definitely be on guard. It didn't matter. His goal was to prevent the Eternals from interfering with the death of Sky Law. Right, there was still Bai Wuxian, but she still hadn't appeared. Lu Yin frowned as he had completely forgotten about her. There was also the last of the three masters. With that in mind, Lu Yin tapped his finger and continued to roll the die. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. If he wanted to use his divine power to roll the die, he would have to fuse with the bodies of these two people. He wanted to see who Bai Wuxian was. He decided that if nothing unexpected happened, he would roll the die here. He had to use this method to dig out Bai Wuxian. The die slowly stopped. 2 pips. Continue. 5 pips. Continue. 6 pips. His consciousness appeared in a dark space. Lu Yin looked around, but he didn't see any bright orbs. He started to search, but he couldn't find any. Lu Yin didn't need to worry about using his divine power to roll the die. His divine power planet wasn't small anymore, and it was enough for him to use. However, he still couldn't find any orbs after searching for a long time, so he gave up. 10 days later, he continued to roll the die, but he couldn't get 6 pips. He waited for another 10 days before continuing. During this time, the butterfly came to the above heaven sect once, but it was chased away by the Mavis family's beauty. The butterfly didn't threaten him, so it left. Lu Yin had been in seclusion for nearly 2 months, and he finally rolled 6 pips for the 3rd time. It was too difficult, and the more he rolled, the harder it was to get 6 pips. This was a rule. This time he saw an orb of light. It wasn't bright, which meant that the owner of this orb was only a progenitor. Lu Yin had no choice but to fuse with it. When he opened his eyes, he saw a sea of red. Was this a lake of divine power? His memories fused, and Lu Yin sighed. He hadn't expected to fuse with this corpse again. This corpse had been under the lake in the first calamity, and it hadn't been too far from Hui Wu. Lu Yin had fused with it once, and he had seen Hui Wu. He hadn't expected to fuse with it again. The only true god could sense this place through his divine power, so Lu Yin couldn't stay for long. He turned to look in Hui Wu's direction. He had originally planned to leave as this corpse wasn't worth much. Suddenly his gaze changed. He met a pair of dark red eyes that belonged to Hui Wu. They should have been turbid and had lost their intelligence. But at this moment, even though these eyes were dark red, they were extremely clear. That's right, it's clear and bright, the kind that has wisdom. The eyes were the windows to one's soul, and Lu Yin was certain that these eyes represented intelligence and clarity. Hui Wu was intelligent. Lu Yin was stunned for a moment before he returned to the dark space. The 4 seals followed closely behind, trying to suppress him. He hurriedly fled back into his body and avoided another attack. As long as he was fast enough, the only true god would be helpless. Lu Yin raised his hand and continued rolling his die. He still wanted to fuse with that corpse and see what was going on with Hui Wu. It would be even better if he could fuse with Hui Wu. Hui Wu could have escaped the Eternals, but he had chosen not to. Mu Ji had exposed him when she returned to the first calamity, and he had been thrown into the lake of divine power to be transformed into a berserk corpse. During the battle of the first calamity, he had brought the Shaoyin divinity to the Black Mother Tree for unknown reasons. After that battle, he had been thrown into the lake of divine power once more. It didn't matter if he was a spy or not, as long as he was transformed into a berserk corpse, everything would be fine. But now Lu Yin was certain that Hui Wu hadn't been transformed into a berserk corpse. Although there were signs of a berserk corpse on the surface, his eyes were extremely clear. What was he doing? Lu Yin thought back to when he had wanted to take Hui Wu away in the first calamity. Wasn't it time? Hui Wu definitely had his own motives. He wanted to fuse with that berserk corpse again and talk to Hui Wu to see what he was up to. A month later, he rolled 6 pips once more. This time he saw 2 extremely bright balls of light and 1 dim ball of light. Without hesitation, he fused into the dim ball of light, all for the sake of Hui Wu. Unfortunately, this chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. He fused with a progenitor realm corpse king in the second calamity, and he immediately committed suicide. Continue. 10 days later he rolled possession again, but he didn't find anything. There wasn't even a single ball of light. Continue. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. During this time, Lu Yin hadn't rolled possession many times, and even if he hadn't found any balls of light. The only thing he had gained was fusing with Di Qiong's body once. But the only true god had moved too quickly, and Lu Yin had only managed to slap himself once before retreating. One slap. That's right, it was just one slap. It was useless for him to injure himself since the ancient god had already recovered. Since it was useless, he wouldn't hurt himself. This slap was especially loud in the first calamity, and when Lu Yin retreated from Di Qiong's body, Di Qiong's angry roar echoed throughout the first calamity. The Forgotten Ruins god giggled. The Eternals were usually cold, but this scene made many people want to laugh. Laughter aside, Lu Yin's methods made them shiver. If Lu Yin used this during a battle, it wouldn't just be a matter of humiliation. It would be a matter of life and death. The ancestor had specifically asked the only true god if there was any way to stop it, but the only true god had no way. The Eternals were having a headache, and so was Lu Yin. It had been half a year, but he hadn't been able to fuse with the berserk corpse even once. How could he meet Hui Wu? He sighed and continued. The die slowly stopped spinning. Possession, 6. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. This was going smoothly. In the dark space, Lu Yin saw the dim ball of light in the distance and rushed over without hesitation. He opened his eyes. Was this a heavy ghost? And it was a heavy ghost? There weren't many Eternals who could cultivate divine power, so Lu Yin had to repeatedly fuse with another person. The heavy ghost faced Mu Ji, whose memories were fused with him. The only true god had used a two-person team to deal with him, so he couldn't do anything even if he fused with anyone. Furthermore, the entire first zone of disaster was filled with divine power, which was the only true god's method of dealing with him. However, this didn't stop Lu Yin from making his first move. For example, Di Qiong had slapped himself. He looked at the divine power around him. In the past, the only true god wouldn't know if he fused with the heavy ghost unless he made a move. Now perhaps the only true god would soon find out because divine power was interlinked. The only true god was prepared and wrapped a strand of divine power around the heavy ghost's wrist. Since that was the case, Lu Yin controlled the heavy ghost to look up at Mu Ji and slap her. Mu Ji didn't react in time and was slapped in the face. She was stunned, but then she became angry. Lu Yin, it's you. Lu Yin controlled the heavy ghost to laugh. The great Eternals became like this just to deal with me. I, Lu Yin, am really lucky. Eternals, do you think you can stop me? I can fuse with any living being, whether you're a corpse king or a berserk corpse, whether you're a 7 sky gods or 3 librarians, none of you can stop me. With that, he withdrew from the fusion. In the dark space, the square seal smashed down fiercely. Lu Yin was the first to return to his body and let out a sigh of relief. He had said all that to let Hui Wu hear him. As long as he could fuse with the berserk corpse, Hui Wu would know that it was him. If there was anything that Hui Wu needed him to do, then Hui Wu would tell him. Now it was time to see if he could fuse with the berserk corpse. End of chapter. Chapter 3201. In the first disaster zone, the heavy ghost was confused as he stared at his hand. I slapped you? Muji, are you serious? This is a slap of love. Muji was furious. If he did not know that the heavy ghost was under Lu Yin's control, he would have killed this guy. The two stared at each other and the pink-haired girl trembled. Brother, it's too scary. The blue-haired man said, it's fine. Don't be afraid. The pink-haired girl pursed her lips. I'm afraid that if I slap you, you won't like me anymore. The blue-haired man smiled. You won't. Don't be afraid. Even further away, Wang Xiaoyu and Tiango faced each other. Tiango barked and looked at Wang Xiaoyu's hand. Wang Xiaoyu also looked at her hand and fell silent. The slap was not heavy, but it was extremely humiliating. Lu Yin's actions had truly disgusted the entire Eternal race. The Grand Empyrean had a strange expression. This Lu Yin was truly strange. He did not have the demeanor of a powerhouse at all. In the above heaven, Lu Yin continued to roll his die. He had disgusted the Eternal race, and their revenge had come quickly. They spread the news that Lu Yin could merge with anyone's body, obtain their memories and control them. For a moment, Everyone who knew about this felt a chill. Who did not have shameful memories? Who did not have secrets? Lu Yin's methods made everyone afraid. However, the above heaven responded quickly. Wei Rong sent people to secretly spread the news that Lu Yin could not only control others, but he could also instantly learn other people's battle techniques and obtain their innate gifts. He could even stop time or rewind it. He could even change the past and the future. This rumor, coupled with the rumors of Lu Yin's ability to control others, caused countless people to mock him. What a joke. How is that possible? I would believe it if Master Lu could control others, but obtaining their innate gifts and rewinding time to change the past and the future? Isn't that a joke? There must be some people with ulterior motives. Whoever says this is an eternal spy. It must have been spread by the eternal race. Who is it? Find him, find. Who dares to slander Master Lu? Find. Soon many people were found. There were indeed eternal spies among them. This time no one believed the rumors. The eternal race was helpless. They had wanted to annoy Lu Yin. Although it could not cause any harm to the above heaven as time passed, they would become more wary of the above heaven. Who would have thought that the heavenly sect would react so quickly, directly muddying the waters and exaggerating the rumors to the point where no one believed them? In the celestial sect, Wei Rong listened to his subordinate's report, his eyes filled with disdain. You want to deal with the above heaven sect with such a small trick? The longer the Eternals lived, the more backward they became. However, could Daoist really control others? Knowing other people's memories was terrifying. Lu Yin didn't know what was happening in the outside world, nor did he need to know. There were many things that he didn't need to deal with. If he had to deal with everything, he wouldn't even have the time to cultivate. Rolling the dice was the key. Another 2 months passed, during which time he hadn't rolled Enhance even once. His luck was terrible to the extreme and he wanted to take a break. But when the die finally stopped spinning at Enhance, Lu Yin heaved a sigh of relief. He had finally rolled it. When he opened his eyes, a familiar red color flowed. It was a divine power lake. It was a berserk corpse and he turned to look into the distance. This time he had merged with another berserk corpse and fortunately, it wasn't too far away from Hui Wu. Lu Yin was overjoyed. He had finally merged back into the mad corpse. With a casual wave of his hand, a river of divine power swept past Hui Wu. Hui Wu looked at Lu Yin and met his gaze. He opened his mouth but no words came out. There was no sound, but Lu Yin could understand what he was saying and his eyes widened. With that, Hui Wu closed his eyes. Lu Yin hurriedly withdrew from the fusion, but this time the square seal caught up to him and viciously suppressed him. Even though Lu Yin quickly returned to his body, he was still suppressed, mainly because Hui Wu's words had delayed him. When he opened his eyes, his consciousness returned to his body, and his face paled as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His consciousness planet had cracked. He had been injured. The sole true God had caught up to him and shattered his consciousness planet. Before he recovered, he couldn't break through the barrier and merge with the Eternals unless he was in the same place as them. However, there was no need to worry about that for now. Lu Yin stood up, learning something important from Hui Wu. The Black Mother Tree had taken root, and Genesis dust was at the roots of the tree. Genesis dust was the progenitor's weapon, and there had once been 6 continents in the primordial space. Aside from the first mainland, the other 5 had been formed with Genesis dust at their core. The Eternals had deliberately destroyed the continents in order to destroy the above heaven. Was there a connection between the destruction of the above heaven and the destruction of the continents? Now Lu Yin knew that the Eternals had done it for Genesis dust. There was a speck of Genesis dust on his forehead, but he didn't know if it had originally been with the progenitor or if it had belonged to the first mainland. Although the first mainland hadn't been created by the progenitor, it had still been merged with Genesis dust. The Genesis dust on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th mainlands were all gone. The 5th and 6th mainlands still existed, so they definitely had Genesis dust. At this moment, the Genesis dust at the roots of the Black Mother Tree should be the Genesis dust of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th mainlands. Lu Yin didn't know how Hui Wu knew, but he knew that he had to take Genesis dust with him. That was the progenitor's weapon, so it would definitely be useful to him. The only way to reach the roots of the Black Mother Tree was through the domain of disaster. And the 6th domain of disaster was already under his control. If he wanted to, Lu Yin could control the entire domain of disaster other than the first domain of disaster. The scattered Eternals wouldn't be a match for the current above heaven, But Lu Yin hadn't attacked the Eternals because of the appearance of the four guardians after the Imperial Martial Edict. However, the sixth domain of disaster was also fine. Lu Yin instructed the above heaven before heading to the sixth domain of disaster. The above heaven had a stargate that led directly to the sixth domain of disaster. With a single step, Lu Yin arrived at the sixth domain of disaster. He looked up and saw the Black Mother Tree surrounded by the six paths of reincarnation world. The one true God looked down and met Lu Yin's gaze. "Can you still use your turbid treasures?" the one true God asked. Lu Yin looked at the one true God. "Of course, do you still want to try the taste of a slap? It's just a small trick. Your turbid treasures have disappointed me." "What about your turbid treasures? What are they used for? What else can they be used for other than smashing people?" The one true God looked at Lu Yin deeply. "Actually, I admire you for daring to kill Sky Law." Lu Yin raised his brows. "I don't need you to admire my lowly methods. I didn't kill Sky Law and I don't have the ability to kill Sky Law. Sky Law is not here, only you and I. The guardians of the four directions are the greatest enemies of the humans. They have never underestimated the ambitions of the humans. This universe is like a cage, imprisoning all of us and making it difficult for us to interact with the outside world. Tai Chu wanted to leave this universe and that's why he ended up like this." "Lu Yin, I know you and Tai Chu are the same kind of people," the one true God said. Lu Yin looked at the one true God. "I am indeed the same kind of people as the primogenitor, but it's not because of the ambition to leave this universe, it's because of the inheritance of our race. What about you? To you, the Eternals? What are they? Tools? What is this universe to you? Don't you want to leave?" The one true God laughed. "No one has ever asked me this before. I can tell you clearly that the Eternals are just tools to me. As for this universe, there are no restrictions on me." Lu Yin narrowed his eyes. No restrictions meant that he could leave at any time. He could, but the primogenitor could not. In other words, the Eternals could, but the humans could not. The one true God clearly wanted to turn the humans and the guardians of the four directions into enemies, but Lu Yin did not need to do anything because they were already enemies. From the moment the guardians of the four directions had tried to kill the primogenitor, this hatred would never be resolved. Sky Law had killed Ku Zu, and Lu Yin had tried to kill Tian Fa. In the end, either the guardians of the four directions would die or the above heaven would die. There was no third option. Light scattered and Butterfly flew into the sixth disaster zone. Lu Yin looked over and frowned. Butterfly's voice resounded throughout the sixth disaster zone. "Pathmaster Lu, may I ask if you are on the way to the Mirage Zone from the 100 Martial Universe?" Lu Yin was indifferent. "I don't want to talk to you before Fengbu's matter is resolved. Pathmaster Lu, proving that you did not kill Tian Fa will not do you any harm." "But there are no benefits," Lu Yin said bluntly. "The fact that there are no disadvantages is the greatest advantage." "Are you threatening me?" Butterfly's voice was gentle. "You don't want me to keep looking for you." Lu Yin had a headache. "It is indeed troublesome for you to find me. How about this? Didn't the Eternals say that Fengbu is dead and can't be found? Then I will give you what I can find." As he spoke, he threw a piece of paper to Butterfly. The paper floated in front of Butterfly. "There are some names recorded on this paper and they are all from the Eternals. Some of them are not from our universe. Go and find them," Lu Yin said. Butterfly was surprised. "How do you know?" Lu Yin was cold. "We know the Eternals as much as they know us humans. Other than Fengbu, there are no creatures from our universe," the one true God said. Lu Yin was disdainful. "You want us to believe you? How many times have I told you that I did not kill Tian Fa? This Butterfly does not believe me. And Su Wang does not belong to our universe." Butterfly slowly flapped its wings. "Eternals, bring the creatures on this list, I will check them one by one." With that, the paper floated towards the one true God. The one true God spoke up. "There is no need to look. Like Fengbu, many of the names are already dead. This kid wants to use the dead to distract you. He will not admit that Fengbu died at his hands, and he will not admit to the deaths of these creatures either." Lu Yin smiled. "You won't even look at it. Butterfly, I have already shown my sincerity. If you do not resolve this matter, don't even think of getting a word from me." No one else could hear what Butterfly said to the one true God. After Butterfly left, the one true God spoke up again. "Lu Yin, the Heaven Sect's martial prowess has given many people confidence, but the protectors of the 4 cardinal points are enough to suppress you. Why are you so obsessed with the humans? There are too many restrictions in this universe. Don't you want to go out and take a look? In this universe, humans will never reach the immortal realm. Outside the universe, there are immortal civilizations that are beyond imagination. Creatures are born from the universe, so they have to adapt to the universe. The essence of living creatures is change and adaptation. Lu Yin asked, "Then what were you before you changed and adapted?" The one true God did not answer. Sector 6 fell silent. Chapter 3202. The Celestial Sect didn't have many powerhouses guarding the 6th Calamity Zone, but the everlasting race still hadn't managed to take it back. This situation made Lu Yin realize that the 6th Calamity Zone wasn't important to the everlasting race. Perhaps it was the obsession of the only true God. He wanted to compare himself to the primogenitor. However, the ancestors' 6 continents all had Chu dusts. The paths of cultivation were different. No matter how similar they were still different. In the 6th Calamity region, there was nothing similar to the origin dust. Perhaps the river of divine energy was similar to the origin dust. Unfortunately, the river of divine energy in the 6th Calamity region had been sucked dry. He walked towards the Black Mother Tree, searching for Zhou Xian at its roots. The closer they were to the Black Mother Tree, the closer they were to the 6 paths of reincarnation. Ever since the Grand Empyrean entered the 6 paths of reincarnation, Lu Yin hadn't spoken to her. Outside the 6 paths of reincarnation realm, Lu Yin saw a grand heavenly venerate with his back facing him. "Are you confident?" The Grand Empyrean didn't answer. Her bitter adversity was the one true God. Only by killing the one true God could she pass her bitter adversity. All her hopes were placed on the Shaoyin divinity. Only the Shaoyin divinity could make the 6 paths of reincarnation succeed. For this reason, no matter what happened, she couldn't touch the Shaoyin divinity. She wanted the Shaoyin divinity to gain the absolute trust of the Eternals. The higher she went, the more likely she was to complete the 6 paths of reincarnation. She succeeded. The 6 paths of reincarnation world was a battle between her and the one true God. The one true God's strength was being stripped away while she was also using her life to suppress the 6 paths of reincarnation world. As long as she could completely strip away the power of the one true God and kill the one true God, she would be able to survive the calamity and become the first person in the history of this universe, or rather, the first person known to mankind to step into the eternal life realm. However, Lu Yin raised his head and looked at the one true God once more. The one true God's gaze was as calm as still water. Was he talking to me or the Grand Empyrean? In this universe, it was impossible for humans to step into the eternal life realm. If this was the case, then Grand Empyreans were doomed. Was it related to the blood-red figure? The blood-red figure that replaced Sky Law was so powerful that Hongyan Mavis and Star Toad couldn't even fight back. This was a despair that they had never experienced before. This despair made them think of the legendary Immortal realm. Perhaps this universe already had eternal life realm experts, but they just didn't show themselves. Ever since his return from the Mirage domain, this matter had always weighed down on Lu Yin's heart, restricting him at every step. In particular, when he faced the protectors of the 4 directions, he always felt like he was not facing primordial realm experts, but the legendary eternal realm experts. They were omnipotent existences. The Imperial Martial Order gave countless people confidence. However, the appearance of the protectors of the 4 directions had dealt a blow to Lu Yin's confidence. It was the same feeling he had when he saw the Eternals had 6 zones of calamity on the Black Mother Tree. He had been in despair then, but he had made it through. Now that feeling of despair had reappeared. People are good at creating miracles, but miracles will not come again and again. What are you afraid of? The Grand Empyrean's voice traveled into Lu Yin's ears. Lu Yin looked ahead and saw that the Grand Empyrean was facing the first zone of disaster with his back facing Lu Yin. "You've done well, kid. I didn't expect you to reach this stage. Since you've already reached this stage, what are you still afraid of?" Lu Yin did not reply. "I don't owe the Lu family anything." Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. "Say no more." This wasn't the first time he had heard such words. The Grand Empyrean had said it several times, and he had never owed the Lu family anything. "I have my own path and the Lu family has its own path. Humans have their own paths. My Lu family, everyone's greatest goal is to eradicate the Eternals, so I firmly believe that my path is the right one." I firmly believe that I can destroy the Eternals. Kid, if there comes a day when you have to sacrifice some people in order to continue on your path, will you do it or not? Lu Yin looked at the Grand Empyrean's back. There are thousands of paths. At worst, I'll just change to another one. There are many paths to walk, but you can't find one. You can only brace yourself and continue on. Your Lu family was exiled because of your own actions and you deserve it. You've already taken responsibility for this, so what are you still afraid of? From the moment the Lu clan returned, all of you were already reborn. You reap what you sow. Cause and effect will never disappear. Lu Yin couldn't understand what the Grand Empyrean was saying. Crazy woman, are you really confident that you can destroy the Eternals? Crazy. It's just a matter of looking at things from a different perspective. Kid, there will come a day when someone will call you crazy. The Grand Empyrean was clearly displeased. If she hadn't been trapped in the 6 paths of reincarnation realm, she would have slapped Lu Yin. This kid had forcefully used a curse word as a nickname. Lu Yin looked at the Grand Empyrean's back. I firmly believe that there will come a day when the path is blocked. I will be able to open a new path. With that he turned and left. He had come here to head to the roots of the Black Mother Tree, but when he approached the 6 paths of reincarnation realm, he discovered that the 6th calamity zone couldn't reach the roots of the Black Mother Tree. Thus he could only change to another zone. The 5th calamity zone was helmed by the Arrow God, who had 5 sequence law experts under him. They were called the 5 Elders. Among the 6 calamity zones, the 5th calamity zone had the most sequence law experts aside from the 1st calamity zone. However, only 3 of the 5 elders remained and 2 of them had died. In the sky, a figure walked out of the astral door and casually tore through the void, attracting a huge figure. It was the Sovereign. And this figure was Yi Ro. Behind Yi Ro, the Forsaken Path walked out. In the 5th calamity zone, countless corpse kings roared and charged into the sky. They were slaughtered by the Sovereign's sword and their blood dyed the ground red. Magician Wen Huan and Jia looked at the sky in shock. Let's leave the 5th calamity zone. Even the Arrow God isn't here. We can't stop the Above Heaven sect. These are experts from the outer 8 paths. Lu Yin will definitely come. Without hesitation, the 3 immediately left the 5th calamity zone. In the 1st calamity zone, the Arrow God had learned that the 5th calamity zone had been attacked, but he hadn't left. Now, most of the Eternals experts had gathered in the 1st calamity zone to guard against the Above Heaven sect's attack. No one could predict Lu Yin's actions. Sometimes, a battle that seemed like it would end was just the beginning for him. The Eternals had suffered this loss more than once. Magician and the others had come to the 1st calamity zone, which was equivalent to giving up on the 5th calamity zone. The sole true God calmly watched the Sovereign and the others slaughter in the 5th calamity zone without saying a word. Lu Yin stepped into the 5th calamity zone and looked at the Black Mother Tree. From today onwards, the 5th calamity zone is also mine. Do you have any objections, Eternity? The sole true God said indifferently, if you want it, other than the 1st calamity zone, I can give you the other 5 calamity zones. Beside Lu Yin, the Sovereign Yi Luo and the Abandoned Path were leading the way. Unless the Eternals wanted to start a war with the Above Heaven sect, they wouldn't be able to stop them. The Above Heaven sect was worried about the Protectors and wouldn't fight the Eternals. The Eternals were also worried because the Protectors hadn't started a war with the Above Heaven sect. Under such circumstances, losing a few calamity zones wasn't a big deal to the Eternals. The sole true God couldn't understand what Lu Yin was trying to do. Was he really going to snatch the calamity zones? It was useless to him. If he scattered the Above Heaven sect's experts to guard the calamity zones, it would be extremely foolish. What was he trying to do? No one could understand Lu Yin's goal. Lu Yin didn't tell anyone. He walked to the Black Mother Tree in the 5th calamity zone. Here he saw the Arrow God's residence. It was an ice-cold palace. As he stepped into the palace, the light from the fire illuminated the interior, making it look especially eerie. There were murals on the walls that Lu Yin couldn't understand. They should belong to the Arrow God's civilization. The entire palace was built with great care. The stairs, the position, the height, and the murals made it seem like the palace of a flourishing dynasty. Lu Yin had once been the Great Yu Empire's royal regent, and his civilization's heritage could be fully displayed in this palace. Lu Yin wasn't interested in the throne at the top of the palace. He walked towards the harem and finally came to a room. This room was the only place in the entire palace that had a different color. The entire palace was built in a dark gray color, but this room was pink. Lu Yin had never expected to see pink in the Eternals. At the same time, in the first Calamity Zone, the Arrow God suddenly stood up and was about to return to the fifth Calamity Zone. The ancestor looked over. "What do you want to do?" The Arrow God coldly replied, "Go back. You'll be courting death if you go back," the ancestor said. The Arrow God didn't hesitate to take out his astral door and step out to return to the fifth Calamity Zone. Di Qiong frowned. If the Arrow God was concerned about the fifth Calamity Zone, then why wouldn't he be concerned about the third Calamity Zone as well? Wu Tian was in the third Calamity Zone. Was he really going to give Wu Tian to the Above Heaven sect? Di Qiong wouldn't agree. Since that was the case, he might as well defeat the Above Heaven sect in the fifth Calamity Zone. Just as he was about to leave, the one true God's voice rang out. "Don't act rashly." Di Qiong faced the Black Mother Tree and respectfully said, "My lord, Wu Tian is still in the third Calamity Zone. Let him be." Di Qiong was stunned and couldn't help but look at the ancient god. Wu Tian had been unwilling to leave the third Calamity Zone several times, and there had to be a reason. Di Qiong didn't know why, but the ancient god definitely knew. Since the one true god didn't allow Di Qiong to move, it meant that he didn't care about Wu Tian. This meant that the one true god should know as well. Even though Di Qiong wanted to understand, he could only sit down in front of the one true god's orders. Aside from the Arrow God, no one else headed to the fifth Calamity Zone. Within the palace in the fifth Calamity Zone, Lu Yin pushed open the door to a warm princess room. It didn't look like it was in the Calamity Zone at all. He stepped out, but suddenly, a cold, killing intent appeared behind him. Lu Yin turned around and saw a cold glint from the Arrow God. She actually dared to come here. With a clang, the arrow was cut in half. It came from the abandoned path who blocked Lu Yin's path. The Arrow God Yi Luo walked out from the other direction. "You came here alone. Do you want to die?" Lu Yin looked at the Arrow God, his eyes filled with cold, killing intent. No one had ever said such words to the 3 masters and the 6 masters. It had always been the Eternals who threatened others, but now they were being ignored and threatened. The Arrow God hadn't experienced such a feeling in a long time. "Leave that place." The Arrow God's face was beautiful. She was the only one who would rather be a ghost under the arrow than a stranger. Her beauty was stunning, especially in this gloomy palace. She was like a princess in eternal slumber. Her crimson hair danced in the wind with determination. "Thank you. Desert dust is finished. Brother's reward, I'll give it to you, thank you." Chapter 3203. She had fought the Arrow God several times, and each time her opponent had always been Daoist. Aside from the first time when she had used her arrows to suppress the battle and shock everyone. In every subsequent battle, Lu Yin had not paid much attention to her, as Daoist was more than enough to hold her back. This was the first real battle between him and the Archer God. Kill. With that order, Abandoned Path disappeared. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. It was time to avenge the destruction of his civilization. Abandoned Path appeared behind the Arrow God and stabbed his broken blade towards her snow-white neck. Just as the blade was about to pierce her crimson hair, an arrow appeared in front of her. The Arrow God gripped the arrow and deflected the broken blade, causing a soft sound to ring out. Abandoned Path changed direction and stabbed from the other side. He was one step faster than his opponent, so he always had the advantage. However, he had fought the Arrow God too many times and knew that it would not be easy for him to succeed. Fortunately, he was not alone this time. In another direction, Yi Ro crossed his arms and used his heaven and earth furnace. He had seen the Arrow God's power before. During the battle in the second disaster realm, if not for Daoist, no one had been able to stop this woman. The Arrow God did not even look back as she blocked Abandoned Path's attacks multiple times. She stepped on her bow and fired arrows with her left hand. Arrow after arrow shot towards Yi Ro, and even though the arrows were not very powerful, they still caused Yi Ro's scalp to go numb. He knew that he could not block these arrows, but they had locked onto him, so he could only brace himself and receive them. The third and fourth arrows were all useless until the fifth arrow pierced through Yi Ro's body, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Back in the first disaster realm, the Arrow God had used her fifth arrow to pierce through Void Master's body and suppress the entire battlefield. Her arrows were very strange. Abandoned Path's expression turned ugly. His advantage of being one step faster had completely failed, and he had no choice but to retreat. It was the same thing that had happened the first time he had ambushed the arrow god. This woman's sequence laws had completely thrown his own sequence laws into chaos. Yes, it was chaos. This woman's sequence laws were chaos. Lu Yin used reverse step in parallel time. It was time to attack. After all, his opponent was one of the 3 masters and 6 voids, and she was very powerful. The arrow god's crimson hair danced in the wind as her sequence laws filled the void. Lu Yin stepped into her sequence laws, and his reverse step lost its effect. Instead, he was met with her arrows. An infinite inner world appeared, and the lines of power collided with each other. The arrow shot into the limitless inner world and collided with the lines of power. The collision formed new lines of power, and as the arrow drew closer and closer to Lu Yin, the lines of power almost covered the entire void and completely blocked the arrow. In the end, the arrow fell to the ground right before his eyes. The archer god did not mind and shot out another arrow. The arrow still shot into the line of power, and the same thing happened again. The arrow god was shocked. What was going on? Behind him, the abandoned path's broken blade closed in, but the archer god's arrow slashed it open, forcing it to retreat step by step. The heaven and earth smelt was formed, and the pressure was released, wanting to refine the arrow god. The pupils of the arrow god changed again and again. Finally, he used the eyeless transformation. Gripping the arrow tightly, he leaped out and pierced towards the heaven and earth smelt. With a loud bang, the heaven and earth smelt split apart. However, it did not split apart completely, as it managed to withstand the blow of the eyeless god of archery. Another arrow fell to the ground in front of Lu Yin's eyes, but he immediately absorbed the threads of energy and punched out. At that moment, divine power appeared on the arrow god's body, boiling with the power of the eyeless transformation. The arrow pierced through the furnace, but Lu Yin's punch arrived at the same time. The heaven and earth smelt could trap ruins, but it could not trap the arrow god. Ruins did not have a powerful physical body. If one wanted to break through the heaven and earth smelt, they would need a powerful physical body. The arrow god was a powerhouse who had cultivated the eyeless transformation, and she was strong enough to fight Zhou Xian in close combat. Not all of the arrows Celestial Champion Star had shot into his body were long-range attacks. Bang! The arrow god was sent flying by Lu Yin's punch, and even she could not break free from the suppression of power. Her body smashed through the palace and flew towards the skies of 5th Calamity Zone. The sovereign had long since been prepared. He raised his sword and slashed down, the tip of the sword pressing down on the arrow god and smashing her into the ground. The arrow god wanted to break free from the inertia, but the force was too strong. She could only raise her arms in front of her and allow the sword to slash at her. She spat out a mouthful of blood as her body smashed into the ground. The sovereign gripped the sword hilt with both hands and stabbed it into the ground, wanting to pierce through the arrow god. Beneath the ground, the arrow god suddenly opened her eyes. Surging divine power shot up into the sky and collided with the sovereign's sword. The sword pressed down, but it was unable to tear through the divine power. The arrow god took the opportunity to dodge, and her sword stabbed into the ground until the hilt disappeared. The abandoned path and Yi Xiaodong stepped onto the sovereign and charged towards the arrow god. Above them, land appeared and pressed down. Lu Yin teamed up with 3 experts from the outer 8 paths, which was enough to kill the arrow god. Zhou Xian had fought the arrow god more than once, so he knew that the arrow god's arrows were known as entropy arrows. Every arrow that was shot out would cause a person to go from orderly to disorderly. In other words, any power that tried to block an entropy arrow would become disorderly and unable to take shape. This was the truth of the entropy arrow. Thus, any power that tried to block an entropy arrow was laughable. The only way was to forcefully resist it. Zhou Xian, who had reached an extreme state, was the nemesis of the entropy arrow. However, there was more than one nemesis. Lu Yin's limitless inner world had once been unable to block the entropy arrow, but after his epiphany in the Mirage domain, he had used the limitless to encompass the limited, turning the limited into the infinite. In other words, his limitless inner world was now limitless, and the power lines collided without any pattern. His inner world was an irregular existence, and it was completely unaffected by the entropy arrow that turned everything into disorder. To put it simply, it was as simple as killing a master with random punches. It was that simple. After breaking through the entropy arrow, The arrow god's eyeless transformation and divine power did not have much of an advantage over the other three powers. Yizhu and Dizun both had defenses that could withstand attacks from the seven sky gods, and Lu Yin was even more so. His strength was enough to threaten the seven sky gods. If the arrow god appeared here without the help of the Eternals, he would undoubtedly die. A giant sword swept out, its sharpness threatening the arrow god even in his eyeless transformation state. Yizhu was extremely strong and possessed an inexplicable sequence law. Even the arrow god was wary of him. The Forsaken Path was one step faster, forcing the arrow god to continuously release sequence law to wear him down. Above him the land pressed down. No matter how one looked at it, the arrow god was in dire straits. The sole true god watched from atop the Black Mother tree. If the Eternals moved, the Above Heaven sect would move as well. The Guardians had not yet started a war with the Above Heaven sect, so they had no advantage. However, it was impossible to kill the arrow god. Boom. There was a loud explosion as the fifth zone of disaster cracked open, just like the second zone of disaster. The arrow god's entire body was suppressed by the land, and he was also attacked by Yizhu and the others. He was completely motionless. Lu Yin and the others stood on the land and looked down. The arrow god's aura had disappeared. The Forsaken Path closed his eyes. It was over. He had finally gotten his revenge for the destruction of his civilization. Lu Yin frowned. Had it been that easy? Although they could indeed kill an expert on the level of the seven sky gods if they worked together, it still felt like it had been too easy. The arrow god had been suppressed and targeted from beginning to end. He had not been able to resist at all, and it was as if he had rushed over to be killed. Lu Yin had once fought against Fengbua in the Mirage domain. Even though he knew Fengbua's strength like the back of his hand, he had still had to go through several bitter battles and epiphanies before finally killing Fengbua. The arrow god was one of the 3 pillars and 6 fastnesses, and his strength was definitely not below Fengbua's. Lu Yin had not even used his overturning palm or eternal darkness card, so how could he be killed just like that? He felt like it had been too easy, but the arrow god's aura had indeed disappeared. As he thought about this, the land disappeared and Lu Yin looked down. The arrow god's long crimson hair was disheveled, and he had collapsed on the ground. Fresh blood flowed everywhere, making him look like a painting of a beauty. He had not been crushed by the land and he actually looked very beautiful. The Forsaken Path walked over. "What are you doing?" Lu Yin asked. The Forsaken Path did not even turn around. "Cut off her head and bring it back as a sacrifice." Lu Yin did not stop him. The arrow god had destroyed the Forsaken Path civilization, which was an entire civilization. The Forsaken Path had been an expert of the laws of the sequence, but he had been willing to hide in that part of the universe and live an ignoble life for the sake of revenge. This blood feud was something that could not be described with words. Yao felt that it was a pity. In truth, he had wanted Yi Xiaoxiao to coexist with the arrow god. In the past, he had not wanted Yi Xiaoxiao to come into contact with the symbiosis technique, as he had only wanted to protect her smile. However, as the curtains to the great battle had been drawn out, he realized that he had been too naive. No one could avoid a war between 2 races and there was no escape. He wanted to give Yi Xiaoxiao the ability to protect herself. This woman was extremely strong and he had rarely met a match after the symbiosis with the astro progenitor. The everlasting race was his greatest opponent, and Lu Yin's threat was below that of the everlasting race. Although the previous battle had seemed like an encirclement, it had actually been very dangerous for them. It was a pity that this woman was from the everlasting race and cultivated godly power, so she could not coexist with Xiaoxiao. The Forsaken Path walked over to the arrow god, grabbed his broken blade and squatted down. Just as he was about to attack, the arrow god suddenly opened her eyes. The Forsaken Path was stunned, and he subconsciously used the laws of the sequence to be faster than the arrow god. The arrow god's body shattered and another figure walked out from her shattered body. Her godly power surged as she covered her snow-white body. She held an arrow in her hand and pierced through the void towards Lu Yin, who was not too far away. Although the arrow god was fast, Lu Yin was even faster. He immediately used the inverse step to parallel time and everything around him stopped. However, as the arrow god's particles filled the void, the inverse step lost its effect. The arrow god gripped her arrow tightly and revealed her sharpness as she stabbed it towards Lu Yin's face. Lu Yin knew that it would not be that easy, but this was too strange. The arrow god's aura had not weakened at all, and she did not seem to have been injured at all. How could this be? Had they fought for so long for nothing? This should not have happened. The next moment the arrow god disappeared and so did Lu Yin. They had both entered the Perpetual Darkness card. The moment the arrow god attacked the Forsaken Path, Lu Yin took out the Perpetual Darkness card and hid it in the void. He did not believe that the arrow god was unharmed, and he wanted to finish her off completely within the Perpetual Darkness card. As the two disappeared, the Perpetual Darkness card floated into the air. The Forsaken Path and Yi Ro looked at each other, hesitating whether or not they should enter. Inside the sovereign Mecca, Emperor Shang looked around. This battle was more dangerous than the Limitless Empire's countless years of battles. This was the core battle of the universe. If the Limitless Empire had discovered the everlasting race instead of the Fifth Mainland, they would have all become corpse kings by now. He shuddered at the thought of this. Thank you. Desert Dust is finished. A reward from a brother. Thank you for your support. I'll add more chapters. Thank you. Chapter 3204. On the Black Mother Tree, the one true god was still calm. Would the arrow god die so easily? It was not easy. Killing the others was easier than killing the arrow god. The arrow god was born in a spacetime called Li. There was a very strange thing about this spacetime, which was their talent. Not everyone in the spacetime had talent, but talent would occasionally awaken in some people. This talent was called Li, the same name as the spacetime. It was very simple. Anyone who awakened the talent could put on a skin bag after cultivating to a certain extent. This skin bag was equivalent to a body that was exactly the same as the original body but without consciousness. This body could not be released, so it could not be an external incarnation nor could it be a clone. Its only use was to put it on the body of the original body so that it could be used as a substitute. Anyone who awakened the talent was extremely difficult to kill, because you did not know how many layers of skin he put on. This kind of skin could not be seen by outsiders. When attacked, it was always the skin bag that suffered the fatal attack, not the body. Unless the skin bag was completely destroyed, it was the body's turn to die. At that time, the one true god accidentally learned of such a spacetime and went there personally. He happened to meet the arrow god who had awakened the talent. In order to consolidate his power, the leader of the spacetime took away anyone who had awakened the talent and killed all their parents and relatives. This made the person lose the memory of their relatives from a young age and only be loyal to the leader. Because the talent had to be awakened at a very young age, at that time the memory was not complete, there was no hidden danger in doing so. The leader of the spacetime had ruled for countless years and had always relied on this method. However, the appearance of the one true god changed the situation. He secretly let the arrow god witness his relatives being killed, but he could clearly remember. After that, he did not stop the arrow god from being taken away by the leader of the spacetime and cultivated. In the eyes of the leader, the arrow god was completely loyal to him, and he spared no effort to cultivate him. There were no less than 5 awakened ones with innate talents. In order to cultivate the strongest awakened, the helmsman let them kill each other. In the end, only the arrow god survived. Unsurprisingly, the arrow god turned against the helmsman and destroyed the helmsman clan. It was also at that time that the one true god appeared and took her to the Eternals. How could such a talented person be killed? Because even the one true god did not know how many layers of skin the arrow god put on himself. 3, 10, and even more. Lu Yin and the arrow god were locked in a fierce battle within the Eternal Darkness card. He used his infinite inner world to disintegrate the arrow of entropy and used the dark hall to incinerate the arrow god. Combined with the suppression of the land, the arrow god was constantly at a disadvantage. In particular, the dark hall was a trap that came with the ancient card, which was equivalent to the primordial realm. Moreover, the laws of sequence were ineffective in eternal darkness, so the arrow god was constantly suppressed by Lu Yin. In the end, her godly power was completely exhausted, and her snow-white skin was exposed in the dark space, which dazzled Lu Yin. This woman's beauty was filled with coldness and bloodlust. No man could resist this kind of wildness that needed to be conquered. However, she had no intention of wearing any clothes at all. She fought with Lu Yin naked, allowing him to see everything clearly. It was impossible for Lu Yin to not be distracted, so he had no choice but to pull away from the arrow god and use the wordless heaven book to increase his vitality. Together with the dark hall, he was able to kill the arrow god once more. Lu Yin watched as the arrow god lay dead in the void, his skin seeping with blood. He was like a sleeping beauty, lifeless, but Lu Yin did not let his guard down. He attacked again, but the next moment the arrow god's skin split open and another figure walked out. This one was as beautiful as a painting with snow-white skin. It was another arrow god. Lu Yin's heart sank. This was an innate gift, and it was definitely an innate gift. How many times could this woman be reborn? With his current strength, it would not take him much effort to kill the witch spirit god, the undying god, and the corpse god. However, the arrow god's situation made him uncertain, and he felt that it would be difficult to kill him. The arrow god stared at Lu Yin coldly. Have you seen enough? Lu Yin was thinking about how to kill her, so he kept staring at the arrow god. However, the arrow god was not wearing any clothes. Your innate gift is very unique. The arrow god's gaze was cold. If you want to obtain the fifth calamity, I will not stop you. However, you are not allowed to enter that palace. Lu Yin probed, what kind of innate gift do you have? Also, please put on some clothes. The arrow god stared at Lu Yin. My innate gift is enough to guarantee that I can be reborn dozens of times. You cannot kill me. Lu Yin did not care. It's just dozens of times. Then I will kill you dozens of times. Arrows appeared on the arrow god's body and covered her body like clothes. I can leave this card world, Lu Yin said, but you cannot escape the fifth calamity. That palace belongs to the Imperial Palace of Inner Spacetime. I kept it because of hatred. Everything in that room was built for me by my parents. It's the only place in my memories where I can feel my parents' presence. That place is of no value to you. The archer god spoke slowly. Lu Yin was surprised. You're putting your love for your parents over your hatred for your enemies? The arrow god looked at Lu Yin. Let me tell you something. It is valuable to you, but I have a condition. Lu Yin shook his head. I will not let you go. Whether I die or not is up to me. My condition is that you do not enter that room. Lu Yin had already scanned the room, but there was nothing of value. It was just like a little girl's room. The room was worthless to him, but to the arrow god, it was spiritual sustenance. Tell me, do you agree to the condition? The arrow god asked. Lu Yin nodded. Yes. The arrow god spoke coldly. The ancestor was not alone. Lu Yin did not understand. What do you mean? The arrow god said, I've already said what I need to say. I will not betray the Eternals, but the ancestor was not one of them. However, I will not say too much. It is up to you to understand. With that, she used an arrow to tear through the void and escape from the card world, appearing in the land of calamity. The moment the arrow god appeared, Yi Ju and the Forsaken Path attacked at the same time. However, she did not have any intention of fighting back. With a wave of her hand, arrow gods tore through the void and spread out endlessly. Lu Yin walked out of the card world and punched out. The arrow god was surrounded by chaotic sequence particles, but the punch dispersed them. The next moment, the land reappeared and continued to suppress the arrow god. The arrow god allowed the land to press down on her and allowed the emperor's sword to slash at her. The Forsaken Path and Yi Ju acted as if they did not see the attacks and forcefully endured the attacks. In the end, they risked their lives and rushed into the spatial crack. If an expert at the level of the seven sky gods risked death to escape, it would be very difficult to kill her. The arrow god could be reborn, which was why she was not afraid of death. Such people were the most difficult to kill. She should be dead. The Forsaken Path looked at Lu Yin. In that instant, they had left the arrow god with a wound. Her injuries were enough to kill her. However, they should have killed her before, but she had come back to life. It was very strange. Lu Yin frowned. Did he have to kill her dozens of times before he could kill her? This arrow god was rather troublesome. In the future, he would have to rely on victorious Celestial to hold her back. Lu Yin turned to look at the palace, but his eyes flashed. He looked away and walked towards the black mother tree. He continued to search for the path to the mother tree's roots. As for the palace, he did not go there again as it was meaningless. He could use that room to lure the arrow god out again, but it might also force her to take revenge. Killing humans was not worth it. Furthermore, Lu Yin considered himself to be a trustworthy person. The Forsaken Path was the Forsaken Path's most indignant. He had dreamed of killing the arrow god, but he had failed at such a good opportunity. The arrow god's rebirth had made him realize that if he relied on himself, there would be no hope. Only by following the above heaven sect could he kill the arrow god. The Forsaken Path's dissatisfaction from being forced to join the above heaven sect by Lu Yin had vanished. The cultivation world was like this. It was normal for his civilization to force others, and it was normal for him to be forced by Lu Yin. This was the cultivation world. Lu Yin stood outside the 6 paths of reincarnation, disappointed that the 5th calamity region could not lead to the roots of the Black Mother Tree. "What are you doing here?" the Grand Empyrean asked. Lu Yin replied, "To see if there's a way to destroy the Black Mother Tree." The Grand Empyrean was shocked as he had not expected Lu Yin to have such a plan. Atop the Black Mother Tree, the sole true God heard this and finally understood why Lu Yin was so close to the Black Mother Tree. If the Eternals wanted to destroy the Mother Tree, would he want to destroy the Black Mother Tree as well? Lu Yin was curious. What exactly is this Black Mother Tree and the Mother Tree? The Grand Empyrean said, "The Mother Tree has existed since ancient times. As for this Black Mother Tree, you will have to ask about the Eternals." Lu Yin could not ask and the sole true God could not answer. He only knew that the 6 calamity regions were different from the 6 continents of the primordial space. The 6 continents of the primordial space were the power of the progenitors, and they could even be considered weapons. The 6 calamity regions were formed by the Eternals against the above heaven sect in the primordial space. However, this Black Mother Tree was not simple and it could not be grown so easily. The sapling would grow to the same height as the Mother Tree one day, so how did this Black Mother Tree grow? Lu Yin watched for a while before leaving. Next was the 4th calamity region. He was still thinking about the arrow god's words. The ancestor was not alone. What did that mean? Not a human being and not a human being were 2 different meanings. Not alone meant that the ancestor was another species. Not alone, either she had an expert helping her, or Lu Yin suddenly remembered what he had seen on the day he was exiled from the Lu family. Xianxia was lying on a wooden bed and figures walked out of her body, including Mr. Wei. That scene was still fresh in Lu Yin's mind. Could there be a connection? Not alone. Xianxia, Wei new ancestor? Lu Yin kept thinking as he stepped into the 4th calamity region. The 4th calamity region was the weakest of the 6. It used to have Silent Void, but after Lu Yin had appointed him, there were no experts left. No one had passed the first round of the Chosen of Divinity, and even Yi Ruo could challenge the entire 4th calamity region. This was Blacklist God's territory. Chapter 3205. Yi Ruo easily arrived at the 4th zone. Abandoned Path and Dizun walked in front. With the 3 experts leading the way, all of the experts in the 4th zone had fled. Lu Yin scanned the area and saw that Wei Shu was nowhere to be seen. Only the distant eternal kingdoms still existed. There was no rush. Even if he dealt with the eternal kingdoms now, they would still reappear if he failed to defeat the Eternals in the future. He had to deal with the Eternals first before destroying the eternal kingdoms. That would be a huge undertaking. Many people were born in the eternal kingdoms and knew that they belonged to the Eternals. They had to be separated and educated before they could return to the human world. This was not much easier than defeating the Eternals. Lu Yin walked towards the Black Mother Tree and arrived at the Black Mountain range that belonged to Blacklist God. However, he was disappointed to find that there was still no path to the Mother Tree's roots. It was not that the Eternals had sealed it off, but that the Mother Tree had grown on its own and could not allow anyone to pass through. Lu Yin had thought of attacking directly, but the Black Mother Tree was as tough as the Mother Tree. The Eternals would not be able to easily destroy it, and he did not have the time to do so. He could not let the Eternals see through his intentions, or else he would never be able to obtain Chu Chen's location. Next, the 3rd zone. When he arrived, Di Qiong looked over and saw that Wu Tian was still in the 3rd zone. He could leave immediately if he wanted to, but Di Qiong wanted to see if Wu Tian would leave or not. Lu Yin had already taken the 3rd zone. If Wu Tian did not leave, then there would be a huge problem. Lu Yin was more familiar with the 3rd zone. There was the Corpse King's tablet, the observation platform, and the tower that he had lived in when he was Nightshore. He passed by the tower that he had once lived in, but he did not look back as he walked towards the observation platform. Numerous eternal kingdoms surrounded the observation platform, and when Lu Yin entered, he was surrounded by people who looked at him with fear and apprehension. These people who had been born in the eternal kingdoms looked at Lu Yin with hostility, but he could not blame them. They had been born in the eternal kingdoms, and they looked at the Corpse King more warmly than they did him. Someone threw a rock at him, but it shattered before it could even get close. Lu Yin stopped and looked at the person. It was a young man who was curled up behind the window of a house. It was obvious that he was living a good life, and his gaze was filled with hatred and disgust. This was the same gaze. Lu Yin didn't say a word and continued walking towards the observation platform. Seeing that Lu Yin wasn't affected by the attack, many people around him picked up rocks and threw them at him. Of course, these rocks shattered before they could even get close to Lu Yin. Lu Yin suddenly stopped, raised his hand and pointed in a certain direction. He flicked his finger, causing a visible ripple to spread out and sweep across half of the Eternal Kingdom. A corner of the Eternal Kingdom was completely destroyed, leaving not even a blade of grass alive. This scene stunned everyone. Then they fled in fear, not even daring to show their faces. That corner was filled with corpse kings. The Eternal Kingdom was a place where zombie kings and humans coexisted. It was one thing for the humans to throw stones at him, as these people knew that they belonged to the everlasting tribe. However, there was actually a corpse king that was secretly attacking him. How could Lu Yin tolerate this? After wiping out the corpse king, Lu Yin walked up to the observation platform. Wu Tian was still tied up on the martial observation platform. When Lu Yin arrived, Wu Tian opened his eyes and met his gaze. Lu Yin walked slowly. Li, Senior, thank you. Back then it was Wu Tian who had brought him to martial firmament, allowing him to comprehend Kanyang. That was how he had gained the qualifications to enter primeval battlefield and see the truth of primeval city. Wu Tian was pleased. How many years has it been since someone as outstanding as you appeared? Even in our era we couldn't compare to you. You're very good. You don't seem like a descendant of the fertile lands. Lu Yin looked at Wu Tian. Senior, we can leave now. Wu Tian shook his head. I'm sorry, but we can't leave. Lu Yin didn't understand. Why? He had put on a show to get Wu Tian to leave, but Wu Tian had refused. As for Hui Wu, Lu Yin had also pretended to attack the first zone of disaster to give Hui Wu a chance. But Hui Wu had also refused. These people had no intention of leaving the everlasting tribe alive. Lu Yin didn't know Hui Wu's goal, but he had indeed helped the humans greatly by staying behind. He was the one who had brought the Shaoyin divinity to the Black Mother Tree. Otherwise, the 6 paths of reincarnation might not have been able to set up this trap. The everlasting tribe wasn't stupid and their goal was obvious. Even the Shaoyin divinity could tell that it was to force him to the Black Mother Tree. Hui Wu had also told Lu Yin where Chu Chen was. If Hui Wu was like this, then what about Wu Tian? What was his situation here? Wu Tian exhaled. Fate. Everything is fate. Lu Yin was confused. What is fate? Extreme evil. This is fate. As long as I'm here, this fate will not be drawn to the humans. He then looked at Lu Yin. Remember, don't be rash. The flames of humanity are endless. You can lose, but you won't die. You can run, but you can fight again. Little brat, live. Think of a way to live. Lu Yin walked up to the observation platform and stood very close to Wu Tian. Senior, what's going on? Wu Tian sighed. If you tell me, fate will target you. Lu Yin opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. There were some things that he didn't know because his cultivation was too low. A half-ancestor seemed to be able to fight against the 7 sky gods with all their methods, but were they really that strong? They couldn't compare to the 3 realms' 6 paths, and of the 3 realms' 6 paths, only the ancient gods and patriarch Lu Yuan were at the primordial realm. Above that was Ku Air and above that was the eternal realm. The only true god had repeatedly said that it was impossible to reach the eternal realm in this universe. After Tianfa's death, that blood-colored figure's strength was still vivid in his mind. He was still too weak, pitifully weak. Lu Yin clenched his fists. He had to break through to Ancestor no matter what, and he didn't necessarily have to break through to the 4 inner worlds at the same time. Breaking through to Ancestor, the laws of the sequence and the primordial realm. Only by reaching that level would he be able to understand everything. In the past he had felt that his path was very difficult, and he had to think of ways to deal with the Day-Night clan. Now, however, the Lu family had returned and the world had returned to its original state. His path was still very difficult and he couldn't see the end of it. Wu Tian's words were very pessimistic. Even if Lu Yin conquered the disaster zones, he still felt that he would be defeated and run. Was it because of this so-called fate? Senior, I don't believe in fate. I only believe in myself. How far do you think I can go before I can bear this fate? Lu Yin asked. Wu Tian looked deeply at Lu Yin. How is master? Lu Yin's body trembled, but he didn't say anything. He just walked towards the black mother tree. Wu Tian didn't answer, but it was the best answer. Even a primogenitor couldn't bear this fate and had ended up like this. The guardians of the four directions. It had something to do with them. Lu Yin felt so stifled that he found it difficult to breathe. He clearly had the advantage against the Eternals, but now the guardians of the four directions had appeared. Had the primogenitor been injured by one of them? Lu Yin wanted to go to Immemorial City and ask the primogenitor and Mr. Mu. He wanted to know just how deep this universe was. Wu Tian watched Lu Yin's departing figure and was speechless for a long time. In the first zone, Di Qiong suddenly stood up with a gloomy expression. He hadn't left and Wu Tian hadn't left either. Bastard. He had been fooled. He had always felt that he was the one who had trapped Wu Tian, but now it seemed that he was the one who had been trapped. What was Wu Tian thinking? He suddenly looked at the ancient god and asked in a low voice, "Why isn't Wu Tian leaving?" The ancient god opened his eyes. "I said that I don't know. There's something wrong with Wu Tian. I must kill him." Di Qiong's voice was filled with murderous intent, and he felt humiliated at being fooled. No one answered him. If he could, he would have done so long ago. Wu Tian was still unwilling to leave the third zone. Not only had he traumatized Di Qiong, but he had also traumatized the Eternals. The third zone still couldn't lead to the roots of the Black Mother Tree. Lu Yin stood outside the 6 paths of reincarnation and watched for a while before turning to leave. He suddenly thought of something. The Mother Tree could be drained of astral liquid to increase the cultivator's cultivation speed. What was the theory behind this? Hongyan Mavis and the others had said that the Mother Tree was the earliest living thing in this universe. The primogenitor might not have existed for as long as the Mother Tree. If that was the case, why would the Mother Tree be drained of its astral liquid? The astral liquid was the primogenitor's power. If the Mother Tree could only grow because of the astral liquid, it would have grown after the primogenitor, but that didn't seem to be the case. Did this mean that the Mother Tree could grow with the changes in the universe? For example, in the primordial space, the primogenitor changed the world and filled the primordial space with astral liquid to educate all living things. The Mother Tree could use astral liquid as nutrients and eventually grow to the point where it had astral liquid in its body. If the Mother Tree could do this, then what about the Black Mother Tree? This Black Mother Tree was comparable to the Mother Tree. Did this mean that it had the power to change the current spacetime in its body? Did this mean that the Divine Force River wasn't just limited to the Black Mother Tree and the Land of Disaster? Did it also exist within the Black Mother Tree? If too much astral liquid was absorbed from the Mother Tree, it would be damaged. This meant that the Divine Force River should be the same. Lu Yin walked for a while before stopping to look back at the Black Mother Tree. If he absorbed all of the Divine Force Rivers in the Land of Disaster, what would happen to the Black Mother Tree? What would happen to the Eternals? Lu Yin's eyes burned with passion. He wanted to try it and he was qualified to do so. However, how would he explain this to Hongyan Mavis, Wu Tian, and the countless people from the 6 Paths Society? If news of him cultivating divine force got out, it would be a huge blow to him and even the above heaven. Unless no one knew that he was the one who had absorbed the divine force. Yibo Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. If he still had this identity, then would the Yibo identity have to come out? What about Muji? How would he explain this to the Eternals? Lu Yin walked towards the second Land of Disaster while deep in thought. So far, Yibo hadn't been exposed. Muji didn't seem to have said anything, or else the news would have spread long ago. As for the Eternals, Yibo was already dead. After the Chosen of God's battle in Primeval City, Yibo hadn't appeared again. What would happen if he appeared again? How would he appear? Chapter 3206. Not long after Lu Yin arrived at the second zone. Ever since Ruins had been killed, the second zone had been half abandoned. When Lu Yin arrived at the second zone, it was considered part of the above heaven sect's territory. Although Ruins had died, there should still be Lon Lon. However, the second zone was in decline. Aside from the Eternal Kingdom, there wasn't a single decent corpse king. Those that could be transferred away had all been transferred to the first zone. From the 6th zone to the second, Lu Yin had basically circled around the Black Mother Tree. Saying that he wanted to destroy it was a good excuse. He slowly arrived at the area closest to the Black Mother Tree, which was also the area where Ruins had once been. Lu Yin's domain continued to expand as he looked down. Soon his eyes lit up. There was hope. The mother tree's roots were extremely lush, different from the astral tree where there was a mortal realm. However, there was no mortal realm in the astral tree, just a stretch of dark roots that stretched endlessly. The other zones couldn't see through the roots of the darkness, but there was a gap in the second zone. The second zone was the closest to the first, and it was probably because the first zone was directly connected to the mother tree's roots that there was a gap in the second zone. Just as Lu Yin was about to descend, he suddenly turned around and saw a figure in the distance distort the void and slowly walk out. Yi Ro and the abandoned person appeared and looked at the figure. It was a very young man with handsome features that leaned towards femininity. His gaze was deep and there was a hint of a smile on his lips as he walked towards Lu Yin step by step. This person's appearance made Lu Yin and the others wary, as this person gave them a sense of danger. Lu Yin stared at the newcomer and his many years of battle intuition told him that this person was very dangerous. The youth walked towards Lu Yin step by step, completely ignoring Yi Ro and the abandoned person who were blocking his way. With a single step the youth brushed past Yi Ro and the abandoned person. In front of him, a giant sword was stabbed into the ground from the Dizun mecha. The Dizun mecha was incomparably huge and it towered over the second zone, blocking the youth's path. The youth looked up at the Dizun mecha. Interesting, but I don't like being blocked. I'll give you a chance to stop. Emperor Shang stared at the young man from inside the Zun mecha armor. What an arrogant tone. If it was in the past he wouldn't have cared. But now, after experiencing so many battles between the Above Heaven sect and the Eternal race, he knew that some people looked insignificant but were extremely terrifying. There were more than 10 experts on both sides who could threaten him. This young man already made him uneasy, so he subconsciously blocked his path. Now, he looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin waved his hand. Emperor Shang heaved a sigh of relief as he pulled out his sword. However, his gaze was still fixed on the young man. The youth smiled faintly at Lu Yin. Nice to meet you. I'm Xianxia. Lu Yin's gaze turned cold and he was rather surprised. Human. Xianxia's lips curled into a smile. Yes, human. Guardian of the Four Directions? Not bad. Lu Yin hadn't expected that there would be a human among the guardians. Lu Yin, Pathmaster Lu, right? Xianxia asked as he sized Lu Yin up. Lu Yin met his gaze. You are not from our universe. Xianxia nodded. Indeed. In this universe the most ancient existence was the primogenitor. The primogenitor had taught the 3 realms and 6 paths, but he hadn't broken through to the primordial realm yet. The ancient god and ancestor Lu Yuan had only broken through recently. Since Xianxia was a guardian of the 4 directions, he must be a primordial realm existence. If he was from this universe, ancestor Lu Yuan and the others would have recognized him. A human and a primordial realm expert. There was only one explanation. He didn't belong to this universe. Lu Yin laughed. How interesting. The guardian of the 4 directions is determined to expel creatures that don't belong to this universe. But you don't belong to our universe. Then may I ask who will expel you? Xianxia didn't care. Because I've existed for so long, I can be considered a person of this universe. What about the Lost Clan? Lu Yin asked. The Lost Clan has existed for a long time. You can ask around. The history of the Lost Clan is written by them. What about them? Xianxia said, Pathmaster Lu, there's something you don't understand. He looked at Lu Yin and said slowly, the guardians of the 4 directions have their own rules. The rules are like a circle. If you step in, you follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules. I'm in the circle. Except for the guardians of the 4 directions, all creatures in this universe are outside the circle. Lu Yin laughed. I see. I understand now. Your words are much better than Xianxia's hypocritical nonsense. Xianxia smiled. Even if we are in the circle, we still have to follow the rules. Tell me, how did Tianfa die? Lu Yin put his hands behind his back. There's something you don't seem to understand. He looked at Xianxia. I also have a circle. Those who follow me are in the circle. Those who defy me are outside the circle. Xianxia didn't say anything. He just looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin looked at him without fear. So what if he was in the primordial realm? He had killed Tianfa. But since the guardians of the 4 directions had made the rules, he couldn't break them easily. Although Xianxia sounded domineering, if he really started a war with the Above Heaven sect for no reason, there would be karma that he couldn't bear. Otherwise, since Tianxi wanted to kill Kuzu, he would have killed the above heaven sect long ago. Tianfa wouldn't have been fooled for so long and still chased after Great Elder Shangu. Invisible restraints didn't mean there were no restraints. Pathmaster Lu, you're interesting, very interesting, Tianxi said slowly. Lu Yin looked at Tianxi. I think you're interesting too. Can you answer me a question? Tianxi said, go ahead. Lu Yin stared at him. Who drew this circle for you? Tianxi's eyes turned cold. There is no absolute limit in the universe. When a situation reaches the limit, there must be rules to limit the limit. Otherwise, it will be self-destruction. You mean that the circle was drawn by the guardians of the four directions? Tianxi didn't answer. Pathmaster Lu, I also want to ask you a question. Go ahead, Lu Yin said. Tianxi's eyes were calm. Do you cherish everything you have now? Lu Yin looked at Tianxi for a while. Of course. If you cherish it, don't give it up easily, Tianxi said. Lu Yin asked, what about you? Do you cherish the position of guardian of the four directions? Or should I say, do you cherish your life? Tianxi smiled. Of course I cherish it. But I'm also very curious. Is there anyone who dares to take my life? Maybe. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Lu Yin said indifferently. Tianxi shook his head. Since there might be, I'll let it happen earlier. I don't like to wait. Pathmaster Lu, I'll ask you one last time. How did Tianfa die? Lu Yin looked at him indifferently. I also have a question. Did you come to our universe on your own, or did you come with a different standpoint? Tianxi's eyes widened and the coldness in his eyes was bone-chilling. Lu Yin had this question ever since he found out that Tianxi didn't belong to this universe. He had thought of a possibility. Tianxi didn't belong to the humans of this universe. Then he represented the humans of his own universe. Compared to this universe, what would their standpoint be? Friendly relations? Mutual interaction? Or invasion of the universe? If it was the latter, then the guardians of the four directions had besieged the progenitor and helped the Eternals destroy the sect in the heavens. Everything could be explained. The people of their universe wanted to enter this universe, and the sect in the heavens was extremely glorious. Only by destroying the sect in the heavens could they pave the way for themselves. This was the first thing that came to Lu Yin's mind. After all, he had experienced the unification of the inner verse and outer verse, the fifth mainland, and the entire process of the Six Directions Society. He was all too aware of the conflict between foreign and native life forms. If not for this situation, he couldn't find a reason for the guardians of the four directions to attack the progenitor. There were too many foreign life forms in this universe, and the guardians of the four directions didn't have the ability to completely eradicate them. Their so-called title of Guardian of the Four Directions sounded more like a fake title to deal with the humans. As it was a fake. Of course, these were all the worst guesses. Perhaps the truth was as they had said, and they really did have a duty to prevent foreign life forms from entering. They had also attacked the progenitor because they felt that the humans were unstable. Regardless of the situation, the humans and the guardians of the four directions were on opposite sides, just like the humans and the Eternals. It was only a matter of time before war broke out. Tianxi's handsome face looked even more feminine, and his voice was much colder. It seems like Dao Lord Lu doesn't intend to answer my question. In that case, we'll forget about the matter of Tianfa's death. We'll slowly investigate it. Now, it's time for me to fulfill my duties as guardian of the four directions. He waved his hand and the void behind him tore open to reveal a region. It looked like a city, but at this moment, it was filled with mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Blood dyed the streets red and corpses were strewn all over the ground. At the very top was a woman who had long since died and was suspended in the air by an invisible force. Lu Yin looked over and his eyes narrowed. An indescribable killing intent surged out of him and he almost attacked Tianxi. The city belonged to the Lost Clan. The Lost Clan had been hidden away by the Above Heaven sect and scattered to various spacetimes, afraid that Tianfa would find them and wipe them all out. Lu Yin had expected that the guardians of the four directions would find a few hiding spots for the Lost Clan, but he hadn't expected to see mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Everyone in the city had been killed and blood flowed like a river. The woman who was suspended in the air was Danfangi. Yao and the abandoned ones looked gloomy. They had cultivated to this level and had killed too many life forms, but they had rarely seen such a scene. There were many ordinary people in the city, and not everyone in the Lost Clan was a cultivator. Emperor Shang's expression was ugly inside the Prime Emperor Mecha. He ruled the limitless empire, and even though he was at war with the outside world, he tried his best to provide the people of the empire with the most stable lives. This scene made his nerves throb. It was too cruel. Thank you. QZQ 4418 Baidu. Brother, I'll give you the tip with extra chapters. Thank you. Chapter 3207. Tianxi's lips curled up as he looked at Lu Yin. Look, these people from other universes think they can hide. Isn't that laughable? We're the protectors of the 4 cardinal regions and we know this universe too well. Hide? Is this how you expel them? Lu Yin's killing intent vanished and he was abnormally calm. Tianxi grinned at him. That might not have been the case. After all, there are so many people in the lost race and we don't really want to kill them all. However, Tianfa is dead and we need an explanation. He died because of the lost race, so we'll kill them all and bury them with him. Humans, you always think you're smart, but you're actually very stupid. Even though I'm also human, I know your weaknesses too well. Killing Tianfa was your greatest mistake, and that's only the first. You'll see a second, third, and fourth hiding place being massacred. Lord Lu, what do you plan on doing? This was coercion. Tianxi was forcing Lu Yin to attack him so that the protectors of the 4 cardinal regions would have a legitimate reason to destroy the sect above heaven. Lu Yin did not say anything. He just stared at Tianxi. He would definitely kill this guy, but how? Once he did, Tian En and Tian Feng would definitely appear. It would be difficult for the sect above heaven to face 3 primordial realm experts at the same time, and it would be even more difficult to deal with the Eternals. Once they attacked, the outcome would be unpredictable. Ever since he embarked on the path of cultivation, Lu Yin basically had a 70% chance of winning every battle he initiated. He rarely risked a war between different races, but now he was truly forced into a corner. Tianxi sneered and waved his hand, tearing the void apart once again. Lu Yin's expression changed as he saw yet another city filled with bustling lost tribesmen walking about. Many lost tribesmen also saw Lu Yin, Tianxi, and the second season of Disaster. This is the second one. Tianxi's voice rang out. In the distance, on the Black Mother Tree, the sole true god closed his eyes. Humans' greatest weakness was being emotional. If it were him, he would give up on the lost race, protect the sect above heaven, and slowly plan. With so many human experts, there would be plenty of time to deal with the crisis. In particular, once Lu Yin broke through to Progenitor and reached an even higher realm, who would be his opponent in this universe? However, he knew that Lu Yin could not wait. These were humans, emotional humans. They were so emotional that they were dragged down by their emotions, unable to make the right choice. Tianxi was also a human. He understood humans too well. He was giving Lu Yin time to struggle, but the more Lu Yin struggled, the more painful it would be. If Lu Yin gave up on the Lost Clan, then Lu Yin would lose the hearts of the Six Paths Society. What Dao Master of the Above Heavens sect? What leader of the Six Paths Society? 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 His universe had paid a huge price in exchange for the qualifications to enter this universe. How could he allow the Above Heaven sect to rise again? They were the true masters of this universe. In the distance, someone entered the Lost Clan city and saw a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. When he saw Dan Fengyi's corpse hanging high in the sky, he let out a mournful cry, "Little Feng." The person who came was Su Wuji. He was one of the few people who knew where Dan Fengyi was. He had come to meet Dan Fengyi several times and had already obtained the Lost Clan's permission to let the two of them be together. Who would have thought that the last time they met they would be separated forever? Su Wuji rushed towards Dan Fengyi. Tianxi frowned. "You're just an ant. My masterpiece is not something you can destroy." He then waved his hand and a gale blew Su Wuji away. Su Wuji was pressed to the ground by the gale and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He glared at Tianxi. "It's you, you bastard." He released his void god power and attacked Tianxi. Tianxi's gaze was cold. "You're courting death." Suddenly he turned around and saw a card approaching him from behind. Tianxi did not move and he allowed the card to suck him in. That card belonged to Dan Jing. Su Wuji leaped into the card. Lu Yin's heart sank. Not good. He did not have much time to think. The card cracked open and Tianxi grabbed Dan Jing and Su Wuji's heads in each hand. He walked out of the void and looked at Lu Yin. Pathmaster Lu, one of them belongs to the Lost Clan and deserves to be killed. The other belongs to your Six Paths Society and he dared to attack me. Do you think I should kill him or not? Dan Zheng and Su Wuji were both progenitors, especially Dan Zheng, who was a master of the sequence laws. Even so, he had been easily defeated by Tianxi in an instant. Tianxi's strength far exceeded theirs, and they had not even had the chance to retaliate. Dan Zheng's card cracked and Su Wuji's head cracked open. Fresh blood flowed from his forehead and he looked extremely miserable. His consciousness was hazy. Xiaofang, Xiaofang. Tianxi's gaze was arrogant and he gave Lu Yin a choice. The dignified pathmaster of the Above Heaven sect was at his mercy. This person was already the symbol of humanity in this universe, and if this flag was broken, the humans in this universe would face a second blow. The Above Heaven sect had been destroyed once, twice, and would not have a third chance to rise again. Put them down. Lu Yin's tone was low. He rarely wanted to kill someone so badly. Night King Zhenwu, Reverend Shaoyin and Wang Fan had all done the same, and now Tianxi was the same. Tianxi sneered. Answer me. How did Tianfa die? Lu Yin clenched his fists. In the first zone of calamity, Di Qiong the arrow god and the others all saw this scene. The second zone of calamity was adjacent to the first zone of calamity, so as long as there was no obstruction from divine power, they would be able to see it. Even the 3 High Lords and 6 Vast were not aware of the existence of the protectors of the 4 directions. Were they all at the primordial realm? The ancient god watched calmly. When the protectors of the 4 directions appeared, the third divine commandment would begin. Wang Xiaoyu lowered her gaze and looked at the divine power lake. Beneath the divine power lake, Huiwu looked up and seemed to meet Wang Xiaoyu's gaze. Within the 6 paths of reincarnation, the Grand Empyrean frowned. In the second zone of calamity, Lu Yin slowly released his hand. Do you understand me? Tianxi praised. Of course I do. I have to say that you are indeed an unprecedented talent in this universe. Lu Yin looked at Tianxi and said slowly, I'm talking about my personality. Tianxi raised an eyebrow, but he did not speak. Lu Yin was indifferent. None of the people I want to kill have ever survived. Not a single one. Are you threatening me? Tianxi mocked. He was a primordial realm cultivator, a protector of the 4 directions. Before Lu Yin could speak, a light shone in the zone of calamity and the butterfly Tianan appeared. Tianxi, what are you doing? Tianxi's expression was normal. Fulfilling my duty. Stop. Our duty is to expel creatures that do not belong to this universe, not to start a war with humans, the butterfly Tianan said gently. Tianxi was disdainful. Start a war? What right do they have? Just because of Lu Yuan? Tianxi. Tianan, do you think humans can still be saved? Tianxi asked before Tianan could finish his words. The butterfly flapped its wings. What do you mean? Tianxi said indifferently, human nature is hard to change. The former absolute beginning was arrogant and enslaved. He enslaved the giant starry sky beast and looked down on us. He got what he deserved. Originally we should have reshaped that era, but we could not bear to do so, so we did not interfere. That gave the origin space a chance to breathe. But now look at what has become of the Above Heaven sect. They took in creatures from other universes, disrespected us, made fun of Tianfa and even caused Tianfa's death. These were all done by humans. Their character is bad. They are not obedient and arrogant. If this continues, this universe will be destroyed in their hands. I don't want to see another absolute beginning. You are too kind, but you don't know that humans will only take advantage of your kindness. Ask this Taoist Master Lu, does he care about you? Has he ever understood your kindness? That's right. Not far away an oval stone appeared. It was the last of the guardians of the 4 directions. Its name was Tianfeng and it sealed on behalf of heaven. Tianfeng agreed with Tianxi. Human nature's bad. I have always wanted to seal the humans in this universe so that they can never get out of the cage. It is a punishment, but I have never had the chance. Tianxi, now is the time. Tianan was helpless. Will it be too cruel? Tianxi was dissatisfied. If you think it is cruel, you cannot do it. Look at the humans in this universe. How many wars have they started? Eternity, what do you think? In the distance on the Black Mother Tree, the only true God said, humans cannot be tamed. Tianfeng sneered. Yes, they cannot be tamed. Tianxi looked at the butterfly Tianan. Guardians of the Four Directions, the two of us can do it. You can continue to perform your duty and stay where you are. Noisy. A low voice resounded through the sky. Xianxia and the others looked in one direction. It was the lowest part of the 6 paths of reincarnation, where the Grand Heavenly Venerate was. The Grand Heavenly Venerate slowly turned around and looked at the second zone of disaster. He looked at Lu Yin. Kid from the Lu family, what are you waiting for? The more you have, the more you are afraid of losing? Or are you already afraid? You let these pieces of trash clamor. They are just a bunch of animals. Xianxia stared at the Grand Heavenly Venerate. Taihong, your character is worse. Your words are disrespectful. You will not have a good ending. Tianfeng threatened coldly. I wanted to seal her back then. If not for Genesis' disciple, she would not have survived until now. But it does not matter. Genesis' disciple died in her place. It is also a punishment. Tianan was helpless. Although humans are uncivilized and have bad personalities, they are still a race. Let's try to preserve their spark. It seemed that regardless of whether Lu Yin saved the lost tribe or not, the Guardians of the Four Directions would act. Xianxia could not wait any longer. Even if Lu Yin gave up on the lost tribe, he would act against the Above Heaven sect and completely eliminate the human inheritance in this universe. Lu Yin looked up and sighed. Crazy woman, when did it become your turn to teach me how to do things? The Grand Heavenly Venerate snorted. Although these animals are noisy, some of their words are not without reason. Are humans bad personalities? Lu Yin lowered his head and grinned. Yes, very bad. If you have the ability, come and deal with it. If the heavens do not destroy me, I will destroy the heavens. Everyone in the Above Heaven sect, listen up. As the Tao Lord, I give the order to kill the Guardians of the Four Directions. I, Lu Yin, will bear all the karma. Let us, a vile race, use our sharp fangs to tear apart all enemies. Thank you. QZQ 4418 Baidu. Brothers tip, I'll give it to you, thank you. Thank you for your support, brothers. Thank you so much. Chapter 3208. As soon as Lu Yin finished speaking, the golden light descended. The general appointment platform appeared from the ground and crashed into Xianxia. Xianxia instinctively crushed Dan Zheng and Su Wuji's heads, but at that moment, Lu Yin appeared using the reverse step. A small boat made of flowing light shuttled back and forth. Xianxia was knocked back by the general appointment platform, while Dan Zheng and Su Wuji recovered. Although they were not dead, they had fainted. Lu Yuan appeared on the golden light. I'm evil. What's wrong? It's just a few animals. Hongyan Mavis, Lord Victor, Lu Tianyi and the rest walked out one by one. At the same time, the one true God ordered, Eternals, help the Guardians of the Four Directions. Kill. The ancient god was the first to walk out and punch at Lu Yuan. He had targeted Lu Yuan and so did Lu Yuan. De Chong, let's fight to the death. Fertile Earth, you're no match for me. Bah, shameless. An arrow shot out from the arrow god, and Celestial Champion Star smashed down with his staff. The two of them were now facing off against each other, and only Celestial Champion Star could hold back the arrow god. Otherwise, the arrow god's battle prowess would suppress the entire battlefield. The god of Forgotten Ruins smiled and threw the meditative ruins at Lu Yin. Little Lu Yin, let me play with you. Lu Yin stood where he was. Boundless void god power whizzed over. You're the god of Forgotten Ruins, right? I'm your opponent. The god of Forgotten Ruins was unhappy. I don't like old men. The battle between the Above Heaven sect and the Eternals broke out immediately. It was the second disaster zone. Here one of the Eternals had died. Now many more would die. Xianxia stared at Lu Yin. Do you know? Even if you don't save the lost tribe, you can't save the humans. Your master's old man Mu. He's also from the outer universe. Lu Yin looked at Xianxia. You'll die a horrible death. I promise. I'll let you die first. Xianxia wanted to attack Lu Yin. As a primordial realm expert, it was not difficult to kill a half-ancestor. He did not know how Tianfa died, but Lu Yin did not kill him alone. At that moment the thunder exploded. The Thunder Lord arrived and slashed at Xianxia. Tianan's voice sounded. Thunder Lord, I invited you to join the Guardians of the Four Directions. Why are you attacking us? Xianxia was blocked by Thunder Master Jiang Feng. Jiang Feng was covered in thunder and lightning, and his whole body was covered in a dark purple substance. I don't want to be an animal. Tianxi's gaze turned cold. You're courting death. Up in the sky, Hongyan Mavis green grass was constantly canceling out the radiance of the butterfly's grace. She could sense that there was definitely something wrong with the butterfly's radiance. Tianfeng charged towards Lu Yin, intending to seal him. Along the way, blade and sword radiance swept past, coming from Mu Qin and Kong Tianzhao. The two of them joined hands to fight against Tianfeng. Primordial realm experts could not get close to them, which was equivalent to crippling close to half of Mu Qin and Kong Tianzhao's battle prowess. The patterns on the surface of the Tianfeng flickered, directly immobilizing the two of them. Above his head, a huge sword pressed down. It was from a venerable sovereign. However, Dizun was also unable to move in an instant. Suppressing the heavens is not someone you can deal with. Wait until I seal this brat, then I'll deal with you. Tianfeng charged towards Lu Yin. Di Qiong and Di Xia attacked Lu Yin from another direction. Lu Yin was the center of the battlefield. In the third calamity region, Wu Tian raised his head in surprise. They are actually fighting with the Four Directions Guardian envoys? Fate has already set its sights on him. I forget it. Yi Rou and the Forsaken Path faced Di Qiong and Di Xia at the same time. Around Di Qiong, Wu Tian's scripture flashed. Yi Rou could only attack once and he was immobilized the second time. Di Qiong swept past him and looked at Lu Yin with a fierce gaze. Brat, die. Beside Lu Yin, the void distorted and Wu Tian walked out. Di Qiong, you've learned a lot from me. Today return it all to me. Di Qiong was shocked and in disbelief. Wu Tian? Lu Yin was also surprised. Wu Tian had actually walked out of the third calamity region. The most shocking thing was his cultivation. He clearly looked like he was dying, so how could this happen? Di Qiong was blocked by Wu Tian, but Tianfeng was still unstoppable. It was a different kind of power. No matter who attacked, they would be sealed for an instant. There was no way to stop it. Above heaven sex Tao Lord? Back then I sealed Tai Chu's bloodline, causing him to lose his hands. Brat, today I'll seal your entire body, Tianfeng threatened. Lu Yin's face fell. So this guy was the one who had caused the progenitor to lose his hands. Lu Yin couldn't tell what Tianfeng was, but he knew that he wasn't Tianfeng's match. Thus he didn't hesitate to rush towards the Black Mother Tree. Now that a huge battle had begun and it was initiated by the Guardians, the humans were at a disadvantage against the Guardians and the Eternals. Even if Wu Tian attacked, no one could stop Tianfeng. Hongyan Mavis was also having a hard time blocking Tianfeng. He was about to break through to the progenitor realm. Of the four inner worlds, the one that needed to break through the progenitor realm the most was the infinite inner world. However, there were 3 grains of primordial dust at the roots of the Black Mother Tree, which allowed Lu Yin to see the path to the mortal realm's transformation. Perhaps this path was more suitable now, but he had to obtain the 3 grains of primordial dust first. Don't run. Tianfeng chased after him. Lu Yin used reverse step to parallel time, but this battlefield was filled with the laws of the sequence. His reverse step was ineffective and his body flickered and disappeared from time to time. The runes on Tianfeng's body flickered as more and more stray particles were released. It was like an inescapable net that covered the land, trying to capture Lu Yin completely. Suddenly Tianfeng stopped and trembled. Lu Yin turned back. What was going on? You're not dead yet? Impossible. I sealed you for so long and even tore apart your bones. There's no way you're still alive. Tianfeng shouted in disbelief. A crisp voice came from the runes on Tianfeng's body. Do you think it's that easy to kill me? I've been waiting for this moment for too long. In the sky, Hongyan Mavis, who was fighting against the butterfly Tianan, stared blankly at Tianfeng. Flowy. In the distance, the ancient god and Lu Yuan both looked over and their expressions changed. Lu Yin was stunned. Flowy? Flowy? That was the master of the 6th mainland Zhalon, a name given by the progenitor. Zhalon was actually here? No one had expected that one of the 6 Daoists of the 3 realms Zhalon had been sealed within Tianfeng's body all this time. No one knew where Zhalon had gone and there had been many guesses. Some guessed that Zhalon had died, while others guessed that he had betrayed humanity. Some even guessed that Zhalon was by Wuxia and so on. Otherwise, why would the 6th and 5th mainlands become mortal enemies? However, none of the guesses came true. It was easy to understand why the Zhalon clan had disappeared. Sky Zhalon was a Dao child from the above heaven era, and he represented the Zhalon clan's legacy from his generation. As long as Sky Jialan Zhilua disappeared, the Jialan clan was essentially extinct. After all, the Jialan clan was a single lineage. However, Jialan Zhilua's disappearance was incomprehensible. Even Lu Yuan did not know how Jialan Zhilua had disappeared. Only now did they know that Tianfeng had sealed Jialan Zhilua in his body all this time. Tianan had killed the desolate ancestor, Tianfeng had sealed Jialan Zhilua, and the four protectors had worked together to deal with the progenitor. Tianfeng constantly shook. So what if you're not dead? You're still going to die today. But just you? You're just four pieces of trash who don't dare to undergo the bitter adversity. Even if I'm not even at the primordial realm, I won't die to the hands of you four pieces of trash, Jialan Zhilua said. His voice was filled with exhaustion, but it was also filled with disdain. Oh, are you fine? Hongyan Mavis called out. Jialan Zhilua's voice rang out from the pattern on Tianfeng's body. Kaihong, take care of yourself. Your opponent is Tianan. That butterfly is the most sinister, so don't fall for her tricks. Be careful of her wings. Basically, no one below the primordial realm can break free from the dreamlike illusions. And that one over there, Tianxi. He's the most powerful protector of the four protectors. He has a turbid treasure. Jialan Zhua seemed to understand the protectors particularly well. He constantly mentioned Tianxi, Tianan and Tianfeng's abilities, which made the protectors' faces become extremely ugly. The Lightning Lord laughed aloud. With the support of Jialan Zhilua's information, they were confident they could stop a primordial realm expert even if they were at a higher level of cultivation. Atop the Black Mother Tree, the sole true god looked at Tianfeng. Jialan Zhilua? That woman who loved to dress up and would go crazy even if a single strand of her hair was messed up was actually still alive. She had already been skinned alive, undergoing the most unbearable punishment of disfigurement, yet she was still alive. Taichu, you've really taught a group of good disciples. If he had not controlled Gu Yizhi, he would not have betrayed the humans either. However, no matter how the humans struggled, the outcome had already been decided. There were some things that could not be changed. The humans' struggles were just larger splashes that would eventually fall back into the river of time, flowing peacefully. Lu Yin glanced at Tianfeng deeply before turning around and continuing towards the Black Mother Tree, leaping down. His presence in the current war did not make a difference. He could not change the outcome of the war by himself, so he had to make himself stronger. The 3 grains of progenitor dust would be useful whether he used it himself or returned it to the progenitor. At the same time, astral doors opened outside the above the heavens as countless corpse kings poured in. The war was not limited to the second zone of calamity, but also the above the heavens, the astral tree, the Six Direction Society, and so on. The Eternals had sent all their corpse kings over, including the remaining berserk corpses, progenitor corpse kings, and the powerhouses that had betrayed the humans. Within the above the heavens, Elder Chan, Master Shan, and the other progenitors engaged in battle. The ancestral tortoise directly shrank its head back in, slightly panicked. The hellworm bared its fangs and brandished its claws in a vicious manner, but there was also some panic in the depths of its eyes. The scale of this war was a little too great. The hellworm panicked even more when the Star Devourer appeared. Seemed to be very powerful. In the second zone of calamity, the ancient thunder locust appeared and stared at the lightning lord Jiangfeng. Jiangfeng was helpless. The ancient thunder locust would always come looking for trouble at crucial moments. However, the humans had gained another powerhouse, the desolate ancestor. The desolate ancestor had been recovering in a parallel space where the flow of time was different. Although he had not fully recovered, he could still use the reverse effect without any problems. The desolate ancestor arrived at the battlefield and charged at the ancient thunder locust alone. The ancient thunder locust's lightning struck the desolate ancestor, and the desolate ancestor's body withered as he endured the lightning's might. He looked into the distance and said, "Butterfly, it's time to settle our debt." Chapter 3209. Tianan Butterfly looked at Ku Zu in shock. He was not dead yet. Below, Heavenly Lord Victor smashed the arrow god back with his staff and laughed wildly. "Kujie, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. We should have fought side by side a long time ago." Ancestor Ku laughed in a low voice. His voice was hoarse, but he sounded heroic. "Yes, we should have fought together. Let's see who can kill us on the battlefield." Heavenly Lord Victor grew excited. Let's see who can kill us." The ground of Zone E continued to shatter, and the neighboring third and first zones were connected to the second zones under the influence of some kind of power. The river of divine power flowed out of the Black Mother Tree like a flood dragon, transforming into a blood-red screen of light that shrouded the entire dimension. As the Eternals continued to cultivate their divine powers, coupled with the suppression of time and space itself, the humans were still at a disadvantage despite having many masters and being able to resist. However, even if he was at a disadvantage, he would not be defeated. Ancestral worlds collided one after another. Countless sequence particles filled the void as battle techniques competed for brilliance. This was an unprecedented war. Throughout the ages, only the war that destroyed the Above Heaven sect could compare to the current Archaic City battlefield. Tianxi's face darkened. He had not expected that even after joining the Guardians of the Four Directions, they would not be able to gain an advantage over the current humans. In particular, Jiaolan Jilua had actually revealed all of their powers. If it were not for that, the Lightning Lord who had not reached the primordial realm would not have been his opponent. He had turbid treasures, but so did he. What a pity. I should have made my move earlier. If Tian Fa didn't die, it would be enough to determine the outcome of this battle. Right now they could only fight fiercely. However, as time went on, victory would inevitably belong to them. This was something that could not be changed. Back in the land of disaster, the abandoned path stepped out and appeared behind Jade. His opponent was Jade, and he was one step faster than the others. He could easily kill this eternal woman. The broken blade slashed across. In the abandoned path's opinion, this slash was enough to kill Jade. But before his eyes, Jadeite had actually shifted. That was impossible. There was no way that his blade could have struck the wrong spot. That was the order of the sequence. Jadeite's sequence law was reality, which amplified one's senses and caused the enemy's attacks to deviate. Both Jade and Abandoned Person were sequence law adepts. Abandoned Person had fought with the Archer God several times and had not died. Jade was also an expert that Di Qiong thought was qualified to participate in the Battle of Chosen Gods. Their strength was on par. The sequence rules that allowed him to be one step ahead of others had failed. This caused the Abandoned Person's heart to sink. In front of him, Jade's pupils changed and became pupilless. She grabbed at the Abandoned Person, but at the critical moment the Abandoned Person was one step ahead of others. He pushed her away and looked at Jade in surprise. Jade didn't stop there. After the abandoned path dodged, she stabbed out with her sword in a certain direction. The wood deity was standing there looking a bit confused. Wood God's opponent was Lon Lon. Lon Lon had the talent of virtual reality. She could turn anyone into a virtual character and set the rules of the game. It was because of this talent that Lon Lon had created a nightmare on the 9-star civilization's battlefield. If the 9-star civilization had not discovered Lan Lan's talent, perhaps they would have ceased to exist. And now Lon Lon had used this talent to restrain Wood God. The Wood God was the lord of the wood spacetime, so he had the strength to fight against ancient gods who had yet to break through to the primordial realm. Lon Lon was an expert who had been recognized by the world of ruins and had the right to take part in the battle of gods. Both of them basically possessed the battle prowess of the 7 sky gods. It would be difficult for Wood God to defeat Lon Lon, but it would also be difficult for Lon Lon to defeat Wood God. At this moment, Mu Shen was having a headache. He was restricted to Lon Lan's game settings and had to play all kinds of strange games. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The rules of the game confused Wood God, and he could only barely resist Lan Lan's attacks in the game. The Jade Sword suddenly appeared and stabbed at Wood God. The abandoned person hurriedly used his sequence rules to block Jade's sword. Lon Lon immediately used the game settings on the abandoned person. The abandoned person watched as the broken blade in his hand shattered into pieces. What's going on? The Jade Sword suddenly changed direction. While Lon Lon was using the game settings on the abandoned person, the sword pierced into Lan Lan's body. Lon Lon was stunned and looked at Jade in disbelief. She looked at Jade's pupils that had changed. You. Jade's gaze was cold. I was taught by Wu Tian and was his disciple. Today I betrayed the Eternal Tribe. With that she slashed horizontally, cutting Lan Lan's body in half. Fresh blood splattered onto the ground. Lan Lan's advantage was her talent. She did not have a very strong defense. The abandoned person and Wood God were also shocked. They had not expected this to happen. The Black Mother Tree was rooted in the 6 zones of calamity. The ground of the zones of calamity was connected layer by layer. Lu Yin kept digging through the soil. Further down was the Divine Power River. Lu Yin jumped into the roots of the Black Mother Tree. Many Eternal Tribe experts saw it, but they did not stop him because there was a Divine Power River under the tree. No matter how strong Lu Yin was, he would be affected if he entered the Divine Power River. This was the consensus of the Eternal Tribe. They knew very well that Lu Yin wanted to destroy the Black Mother Tree. However, they did not expect Lu Yin to have cultivated divine power. Not only was the Divine Power River not harmful to him, but it could also increase the divine power in his body. Could be considered as increasing his strength. Lu Yin rushed into the Divine Power River. At this time, the first dust on his forehead was boiling. It had clearly sensed the existence of the other first dusts. The closer he got to the other first dusts, the hotter the first dust on his forehead became. Lu Yin followed the first dust's guidance and approached the 3 first dusts. Finally, a hazy halo appeared in front of him. There were 3 halos which were the 3 first dusts. Lu Yin rushed toward the first dust. Suddenly he stopped and slowly turned his head. Not far away there was a figure sitting cross-legged even closer to the 3 first dusts. When Lu Yin approached, the figure opened its eyes and looked him in the eye. "Brother Zhou Xian, I didn't expect you to find this place." Lu Yin's expression changed. Bai Xianer. No matter what, Lu Yin did not expect to see Bai Xianer beside the 3 first dusts at the roots of the Black Mother Tree. Ever since Lu Yin became the master of the Above Heaven sect and gained great prestige in the Six Direction Society, he had been looking for Bai Xianer. She was regarded as a traitor of the human race. The reincarnation spacetime had protested many times, but it was useless. Lu Yin wanted to find Bai Xianer and uncover her secrets. But until just now he had not found Bai Xianer. Now he saw her at the roots of the Black Mother Tree. Bai Xianer's eyes were bright. Under the dark divine power lake they were not turbid at all. "Brother Zhou Xian, how did you know the first dusts were here?" Lu Yin stared at Bai Xianer and frowned. "You broke through to the progenitor realm?" Bai Xianer said matter-of-factly, "Kind of. I don't need to break through." Lu Yin did not understand. Bai Xianer smiled. "Brother Zhou Xian, have we ever really fought?" Lu Yin's eyes flashed. "No. Ever since Lu Yin became an envoy. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page." Bai Xianer had no advantage against him. When the ancestral Mang besieged the undying god, Bai Xianer appeared. Lu Yin had a feeling that he could kill her. After meeting her several times he had the same feeling. But it was easier said than done to kill Bai Xianer. Bai Xianer was the only one in the same realm who could ignore the power of the stars in his heart. She was also the only one who he could kill without actually making a move. Lu Yin had never underestimated Bai Xianer. Never. Bai Xianer smiled faintly. "Then let's fight today. These 3 first dusts are the spoils of war. Brother Zhou Xian, if you win you can take them away." "I win." She paused for a moment and the smile on her face became brighter. "I want Brother Zhou Xian's life." Before Lu Yin could answer, the immortal radish flowers bloomed around them. The immortal radish flowers were Bai Xianer's talent. When the Lu family was exiled, it rained red flowers in the astral tree. These were the immortal radish flowers. Lu Yin used reverse steps and rushed towards Bai Xianer in parallel time. Everything around him froze, including Bai Xianer. However, Lu Yin felt that something was wrong. Who was Bai Xianer? How could she be frozen by parallel time? She could ignore the power of the stars in her heart, so it wasn't impossible for her to ignore the power of time. Lu Yin punched out from afar. Bai Xianer looked up and smiled. "Brother Zhou Xian, you're so cautious." She raised her hand gently, forming a strong contrast with Lu Yin's fierce punch. Lu Yin didn't use his full strength for this punch. It was just his own strength. Half of Bai Xianer's body was distorted by the punch. Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. Impossible, how could Bai Xianer be injured so easily? Before he could think further, red flowers floated down from the top of his head, numbing his nerves. Lu Yin hurriedly used reverse steps. His body withered at a speed visible to the naked eye, but recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. This recovery speed shocked Lu Yin. This shouldn't be happening. The flowers could numb the nerves, but they didn't cause much damage to the body. How could his withered body recover so quickly? The faster the body recovered, the greater the damage to the body. Something wasn't right. The immortal radish flowers definitely weren't as simple as they seemed. Bai Xianer's body recovered at some point, as if she hadn't suffered a single punch. She raised her snow-white fingers and used split sky. A black split sky swept past, but Lu Yin easily dodged it. The path of Tianyi that Lu Tianyi had taught him allowed him to save himself from a desperate situation. Xianxia used Immortal shows the way again, but Lu Yin dodged it again. She used the frigid Immortal sex battle techniques, but they were useless against Lu Yin. Lu Yin clenched his fist and unleashed his boundless inner world. His power collided and he punched at Xianxia. He didn't hold back. If Xianxia was hit like before, she would definitely die with her defense. There was a loud boom as Xianxia was hit squarely. She didn't even try to block the attack, which shocked Lu Yin. Xianxia definitely couldn't take this punch, but she stood there unscathed. Her eyes glowed strangely when she saw Lu Yin's shocked expression. The Divine Power Lake was still the same Divine Power Lake, and the Mother Tree was still the same Mother Tree, but everything around him seemed to have changed. Everything seemed to have slowed down and the ripples should have been very fast. However, Lu Yin looked at the ripples of the Divine Power River in front of him. Why had it become so slow? It was so slow that it was driving him crazy. End of chapter. Chapter 32:10. He stared at it for a very long time, silently counting the time. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Eventually, 100 years, 1,000 years. Finally, 100 years. Finally, 1,000 years. Finally, 1,000 years. How could this be? 1,000 years had already passed, but the ripple still hadn't completely disappeared. What was wrong with him? Was this an innate gift? But Xianxia's innate gift was clearly the celestial radish flower. The ripple continued to flow for 1,000 years, and Lu Yin watched it for 1,000 years without being able to move. No, that wasn't right. He could move, but even a small movement would take him 1,000 years, just like this ripple. His thoughts, however, were normal. He counted the time and 1,000 years had definitely passed. Was this an amplification of his senses? His perception of time in the outside world was extended infinitely, but his perception of time hadn't changed. This was an innate gift, definitely an innate gift. A sharp pain came from his abdomen, but Lu Yin recovered in an instant. A black line streaked past his eyes and it was still split the heavens. He quickly dodged and looked down. His withered body had recovered at some point, and the gaping wound on his abdomen had come from split the heavens. Lu Yin looked at Xianxia. You have 2 innate gifts. Xianxia smiled faintly. Brother Zhou Xian, you haven't hurt me yet. Lu Yin's expression turned solemn. Reverse step and strength had both failed and the scene just now had been magnified infinitely. It was terrifying and even he couldn't avoid it. Or rather, he didn't know how to avoid it. While his senses had been magnified infinitely, he'd allowed Xianxia to attack him. If Split the Heavens hadn't torn open his abdomen, but his neck instead, he didn't dare imagine what would have happened. Lu Yin released the void in his heart, and a piece of land appeared, overlapping with the visualized land and suppressing it. Xianxia looked up at the land and exclaimed, "Is this the power of a progenitor? Brother Zhou Xian, your path might be complicated, but I have a feeling that your future will be extremely bright. So please die here. I like you a lot, but the ending will not change." The wordless heavenly tome appeared at this time, increasing the vitality of the land. The land pressed down and even Fengbua spat out blood. The corpse god and Ji Luo had both died to this move. Lu Yin didn't believe that Xianxia was unshakable. Xianxia was suppressed by the land and she didn't move. She allowed Lu Yin to crush her body. However, when the land was completely pressed down, Xianxia recovered from her original position without any damage. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. Skip time? No erasing time? He had encountered this situation more than once, and the one that left the deepest impression was naturally the undying god's ability to skip time. If he skipped the time when he was injured, he could recover, but the skip time still existed. Lu Yin had caught one when he was fishing in the river of time. However, Xianxia didn't skip time. It was as if that space and time couldn't be changed. How could there be such a combat skill? The power of time could sometimes be very magical. Everything around him slowed down once more. It was here again. His senses were stretched out endlessly. Lu Yin could see that the land was disappearing, but this process would take a long time. 100 years. 1,000 years. Or 10,000 years. He couldn't guarantee what it would feel like to experience the same scene for 10,000 years. He would go crazy. Is there any way to get rid of it? The closest was the gray planet with flowing light and dead wood. But that was not right. Time had never changed. What had truly changed was his senses, and it had nothing to do with the power of time. How do I recover my senses? Lu Yin gazed at watching the land slowly disappear. He began to recite the primogeniture scripture. It was useless. The Lu family cultivated the primogeniture scripture to strengthen their spiritual force, and Lu Yin hadn't studied it in other directions. Time continued to pass, and more accurately, the time his senses could see was constantly being stretched out. Lu Yin didn't know how much time had passed, but he kept trying to awaken his normal senses, but it was useless. A sharp pain came, this time from his heart. With the pain, his senses returned to normal. Lu Yin passed through the flowing light and reversed time for a second. In front of him, Xianxia smiled. Brother Zhou Xian, your reaction is fast. You know how to reverse time to heal your injuries. Lu Yin clutched his heart and recovered. He had been injured again by Xianxia, but fortunately he could reverse time. He felt that this was troublesome. Xianxia stood still and allowed him to attack. Every time he attacked, he had the ability to kill her, but she could recover. It was difficult to break through, and her innate gift allowed him to endure the pain of his senses being stretched out again and again. He could endure it once or twice, and he could even endure it for 100 or 1,000 years. However, if his senses were stretched out to 10,000 years or even longer, he couldn't guarantee that he could endure it. This wasn't seclusion, but rather an image that lasted for 10,000 years, 100,000 years, and so on. This was a desperate situation for a human's senses. Lu Yin waved his hand and the progenitors appeared. He didn't expect these progenitors to do anything to Xianxia. His goal was to scatter them. Xianxia could extend her own senses, but she couldn't affect these progenitors. As long as there was external stimulation, she could immediately recover. The divine seal catalog appeared above his head, and Lu Yin's abdomen was still bleeding. He used the victorious battle technique, and a terrifying aura emanated from him. His eyes flashed with cold, killing intent as he took out Zhou Xian from his cosmic ring. Zhou Xian took a step forward and charged towards Xianxia. Zhou Xian's slash could heavily injure Xianxia no matter if it was land suppression or physical strength. However, Xianxia was able to recover quickly. Since that was the case, Zhou Xian might as well not use his physical strength and use his most basic attack. He didn't believe that Xianxia could recover every single time. Even so, he still wanted to see Xianxia's battle techniques clearly. There was no battle technique that couldn't be broken. In the face of Lu Yin's Zhou Xian, Xianxia moved away for the first time, constantly dodging Lu Yin's attacks. However, Lu Yin had obtained a method to break through weapons from the martial tablet, and he was even more proficient in using the Zhou Xian. Even Xianxia couldn't dodge all of his attacks, and from time to time, a wound would appear on her body, dyeing her white robes red. But as time passed, Lu Yin's movements gradually slowed down. This time he was truly slowing down. He was becoming more and more tired from using his own strength, and the immortal radish flowers fluttered around him. The Zhou Xian slashed down, but it instantly slowed down. It came again, and his senses were still extended indefinitely. Lu Yin stared at the Zhou Xian, knowing that he would have to look at it for at least 100 or even 1,000 years. The more he experienced it, the more uncomfortable it became. If he didn't have a way to break through this feeling, he knew that he would lose to Xianxia sooner or later. Xianxia now had the strength of a progenitor and was a powerhouse who had broken through the progenitor realm. It wasn't shameful for Lu Yin to lose to her as a half-ancestor, but Lu Yin was an existence who could jump realms and fight against the 7 sky gods. Even in the progenitor realm, the 7 sky gods were absolute powerhouses that were second only to the 3 realms 6 Daoists. They could even rival the 3 realms 6 Daoists to a certain extent. Lu Yin's current strength couldn't be compared to his current realm, but Xianxia still suppressed him. She was like cotton, and no matter how Lu Yin hit her, there would definitely be an effect, but it would recover in the blink of an eye. This feeling was much more uncomfortable than when he had dealt with Fengbua and the zombie god. However, Xianxia's attacks weren't decisive. Instead, they extended the senses and brought about an extremely uncomfortable feeling of despair. Lu Yin had never experienced such a method before. Ever since he had broken through to half-ancestor, this was the first time he wasn't confident that he could face a progenitor. At this moment, he discovered that the progenitor he had summoned was actually useless, as he couldn't transmit any orders to the outside world. Intense pain shot through his body as a beam of light shot through his body and reversed for a second. Lu Yin took a step forward, and his Zhou Xian spun as it slashed in all directions. Bai Xian'er wasn't surprised that Lu Yin could recover. What she wanted was for Lu Yin to continuously extend his senses and numb him. Once Lu Yin got used to the extended senses, he would either become numb and unable to respond properly to the outside world, or he would go crazy. There were only two possible outcomes. However, there was one thing that surprised her. Brother Zhou Xian, you're currently under the Divine Power Lake, but you're still fine. Did you cultivate divine power? Bai Xian'er was astonished. In the surroundings, the progenitors that had been summoned charged towards Bai Xian'er. The 7-star mantis was the fastest, and he slashed down with his Gullion at a speed comparable to that of time. Bai Xian'er smiled and casually pointed with Immortal guides the way, causing the 7-star mantis to explode. Right after that, the Violet Emperor's vertical eyes stared at Bai Xian'er, wanting to control her. At the same time, Mo Shang and Silent Void charged out from 2 other directions. Even though they couldn't use their sequence laws, one was a finger sword technique, while the other was an empty palm. Bai Xian'er raised her hand, and with 2 points and a line, Sky Splitter appeared. This time Sky Splitter circled around her, slicing through the void and spreading out in an instant. It swept past Mo Shang's Silent Void, the Violet Emperor, and the 17 ordinary progenitors further away. In just an instant, all the Ancestor Realm experts that had been summoned were split into 2. Lu Yin could clearly feel that he had lost a large portion of his astral sources. Even though these progenitors had been summoned, they could use all their strength except for their sequence laws and innate gifts. Even so, they were still easily killed by Bai Xian'er. This meant that even if these progenitors were still alive, their fates wouldn't be much better when facing Bai Xian'er. The gap was too big, so big that it was a little exaggerated. Lu Yin stared at Bai Xian'er. Who are you? Bai Xian'er was puzzled. Brother Zhou Xian, why don't you recognize me? Lu Yin narrowed his eyes. You're not Bai Xian'er. Who are you? Bai Xian'er was amused. Can't Bai Xian'er defeat you, Brother Zhou Xian? Lu Yin sighed. Your way, Bai Xian'er's expression changed and she looked at Lu Yin in disbelief. In Lu Yin's impression, Bai Xian'er had always been very calm, as if everything was within her control and nothing was out of her expectations. But at this moment, Bai Xian'er's expression changed. Lu Yin was very sure that her expression had changed. Lu Yin's words caught her off guard. Bai Xian'er looked at Lu Yin deeply and the smile on her face disappeared. Brother Zhou Xian, what are you talking about? Lu Yin asked in a low voice. Are you Bai Xian'er or Wei? Are you the one who left the paper cut in Xian Academy? You should have known when we touched the paper cut, but why were you so surprised just now? Bai Xian'er sized Lu Yin up and said slowly, because you thought I was Mr. Wei. Thank you for your support, brothers. Thank you. Staying up late to write is too tiring and my baby is making a fuss at night. My head hurts. I'll make up for what I owe, but it won't be so soon. Thank you, brothers. Thank you. Chapter 32:11. Lu Yin raised a brow. Yes, Mr. Wei was the one who had left the paper cut at Xian Academy. He'd also seen Mr. Wei deal with Lu Tianyi on the day the Lu family was exiled. That was why he'd rushed to Xian Academy. In his memories there should only be Mr. Wei, not Lady Wei. Brother Zhou Xian, where did you hear the name Lady Wei? Bai Xian'er was curious. At this moment she suddenly felt like a stranger. Her gaze, tone and actions were all foreign. It was as if she wasn't Bai Xian'er. Why? Does the name Lady Wei affect you? Lu Yin asked. Bai Xian'er's gaze turned cold. It seems like Brother Zhou Xian doesn't plan on answering me. Then let's continue. She stepped forward and raised her hand to strike Lu Yin. This strike seemed gentle and didn't contain much power, but Lu Yin was cautious. Although they hadn't fought for long, Bai Xian'er had taken the initiative step by step. No matter how he attacked, it didn't affect her at all. Now that she took the initiative to attack, it wasn't a threat at all. Although it wasn't a threat, it was the greatest threat because Lu Yin couldn't see where it was coming from. He stepped backward and didn't use parallel time this time. Instead, he increased his speed and rushed towards Bai Xian'er. He also struck out with his palm, but halfway through his strength was rapidly drained. It was the Immortal radish flower. The 2 palms collided and the surrounding divine power roared in all directions. In the second domain of calamity, the divine power lake connected to the Black Mother Tree exploded from the bottom. The continuous impact from below attracted many people's attention. Whether it was the above heaven or the everlasting race, everyone knew that Lu Yin had jumped down. The shockwaves from the battle indicated that Lu Yin was fighting someone. The first person Lu Yuan and the others thought of was Bai Wuxian, the last of the 3 masters and 6 heroes. Aside from these two, there were no other everlasting experts who hadn't shown themselves yet. Only these two could fight Lu Yin. At the roots of the Black Mother Tree, Lu Yin visualized the land where his heart was. His arm was withered and he struck out again. Bai Xian was still as weak as ever, but she blocked every one of Lu Yin's attacks. The immortal radish flower continuously drained Lu Yin's strength, and his withered arm continued to recover. Lu Yin didn't think that the flower could do anything other than numb his nerves and drain his strength. With a bang, Lu Yin used his limitless inner world to break Xian'er's arm. He then slapped her shoulder and forced her back. Bai Xian'er's expression was calm as she watched Lu Yin continue his pursuit. Her lips curled up once more, but she quickly recovered her composure. Her body turned around gracefully, and her strange footwork battle technique fluttered like a butterfly as she continuously pulled away from Lu Yin. Lu Yin tried to catch up, but he still couldn't catch up to her. Bai Xian'er's footwork battle technique also involved the power of time. It wasn't parallel to time, nor was it comparable to the speed of time. Instead, it was like she was skipping through time and erasing the time she was retreating. She was like a fairy that flickered under the divine power lake, beautiful and enchanting. Her hair fluttered around her face as she looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin's heart sank. Not again. Everything around Lu Yin slowed down and extended his senses. This was a technique that Lu Yin couldn't avoid. It was as if as long as Bai Xian saw him, she would extend his senses. That was impossible. There had to be a trigger condition. Otherwise it would be too unsolvable. But he didn't know what that trigger was. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years and another 1,000 years passed. When 1,000 years passed, Lu Yin once again felt intense pain. He reversed time for a second and just as he recovered he felt the pain again. This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page. With his senses extended, Bai Xian planned to use this technique to numb or drive him crazy. Maintaining the same posture and looking at the same scene for 1,000 years could indeed drive him crazy. At the very least, Lu Yin felt numb. 1,000 years had passed, and the only thing he could do was subconsciously use flowing light reversal for a second. Once he recovered, there would be a gap in his battle with Bai Xian, and it wouldn't be as smooth. He was like a deaf man walking through a canyon. Step by step he couldn't see the end of the canyon and the scenery was exactly the same. It was endless. Lu Yin tried all sorts of methods but he couldn't awaken his senses. If he allowed Bai Xian to continue controlling him he would be finished. In the end, Lu Yin decided to cultivate the True God's Freedom technique. This was a divine power lake and it was the only external force that could awaken his senses. However, he couldn't use external divine power so he could only cultivate. The True God's Freedom technique required one to have no self and no other. It required one to abandon one's thoughts and become one with the heavens and earth. It deprived one of one's emotions, thoughts, desires and wishes. The divine power lake shook. It was very small and almost undetectable. However, Bai Xian sensed it and looked around in surprise. Someone was using divine power? In the current battle there might be experts using divine power in all 6 zones, but the ripple just now was very close to her. However, there were no everlasting experts around. Another ripple and Bai Xian suddenly stared at Lu Yin. It was him. The surrounding divine power suddenly boiled and was swallowed by Lu Yin like a whale sucking in water. Bai Xian's eyes widened. She felt that it was ridiculous. He actually cultivated divine power. The only way to break through the impossible was to do the impossible. Bai Xian thought that she had complete control over Lu Yin and knew everything about him. She knew that Lu Yin had a turbid treasure and was one of the 7 heroes, but she didn't expect Lu Yin to have even cultivated his godly power. Moreover, it wasn't as simple as just cultivation. This speed of absorbing godly power was extremely rare even among the 7 sky gods. It wasn't as simple as cultivating divine power. On the Black Mother Tree, the only true god looked down and his eyes flashed. What is this? Lu Yin didn't cultivate the True God's Freedom technique because he was afraid of being discovered. However, he had no choice now. So what if he was discovered? The only true god would find out sooner or later. After all, it was his power. As for Bai Xian, even if she knew, it wouldn't affect her. In the current human world, who could control the situation? Only Lu Yin himself. Even if the everlasting race spread the news that Lu Yin cultivated divine power, it would be difficult to shake his position unless he admitted it himself. At the roots of the mother tree, divine power was constantly being absorbed around Lu Yin. The only true god frowned. He didn't expect Lu Yin to cultivate his own divine power. How did he control himself? Seeing that Lu Yin was absorbing more and more divine power, the only true god took a step forward. The 6 zones shook and the divine power lake suddenly became solid. At the roots of the black mother tree, the divine power also became solid and couldn't be absorbed. Lu Yin opened his eyes and exhaled. The only true god had discovered him, but it didn't matter. He had absorbed a lot just now. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He still couldn't cultivate the true god's freedom technique, but he could use it to extend his senses indefinitely. No wonder it was one of the true god's 3 ultimate techniques. Brother Zhou Xian, you cultivated divine power? Xianxia was shocked. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Lu Yin looked at Xianxia. It's not easy to surprise you. Xianxia shook her head and looked at Lu Yin with admiration. Even Tai Chu doesn't want to touch the eternal power. The more you touch it, the more you will be affected. Brother Zhou Xian, are you planning to join the everlasting race? Why aren't you affected by divine power? Lu Yin asked. They had been in the divine power lakes all this time. Because he cultivated divine power, he wasn't affected. Why was Xianxia able to do that? Xianxia smiled. My power isn't any weaker than divine power. Lu Yin's eyes turned cold. The power of a maiden? Sure enough, he was an old monster who had crossed the bitter disaster. Only those at the same level wouldn't be affected. Brother Zhou Xian, since even divine power can't affect you, I can't let you live. Xianxia's smile disappeared as she looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin's senses were extended again. This time, Lu Yin cultivated the true god's freedom technique. It didn't matter if he couldn't cultivate it. It didn't matter even if he was injured by the backlash. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth again. Lu Yin had broken Xianxia's innate gift. Since ancient times, very few people have been able to break through this technique of mine. As expected of you, Brother Zhou Xian. Now then, I'm going to be serious. Try to hold on for as long as you can. With that, her figure flickered as she stepped on a temporal node and instantly appeared behind Lu Yin. Lu Yin used the reverse step to parallel time. Everything around him stopped, but it was only for a moment. Xianxia moved again and attacked Lu Yin. Lu Yin raised his arm to block Xianxia's attack and attacked with his left palm. Seeing Xianxia disappear, he stared at the void and used the path of Tianyi. After Xianxia appeared, Lu Yin attacked behind him. This attack caught Xianxia off guard. After all, it was Chu Yi's power. Chu Yi was the big brother in the 3 realms and 6 das. His power was stable and could see through desperate situations. His power was similar to the celestial eye to a certain extent. However, Wu Tian's celestial eye could see through the opponent's attacks, while the path of Tianyi could see through desperate situations. Xianxia was hit in the shoulder and retreated halfway. She raised her leg and kicked towards Lu Yin's head. The Eternal Darkness card appeared beside Lu Yin's head. Xianxia ticked the card and her body was absorbed by the card. Lu Yin entered the dark hall at the same time. Darkness surged from all around, burning Xianxia with darkness. Xianxia's body glowed with radiant light as she allowed the darkness to burn her. She remained unmoved and raised a finger to split open the sky. Both of them used Eternal Darkness cards at the same time. The Eternal Darkness card couldn't restrain Xianxia, so she pointed at Lu Yin and caused the Immortal Radish Flower to explode. At the same time, another part of Lu Yin's body exploded as well. His expression changed. This was the flower's power. The pollen had entered his body and exploded, injuring him. The power of this explosion was equivalent to a progenitor's attack. Lu Yin couldn't even count how much pollen had entered his body. It was like air. The pollen continued to explode, and Lu Yin released the starry sky in his heart to isolate spacetime. This also cut off Xianxia's control over the pollen. At the same time, Lu Yin waved at Xianxia and activated Setting Sunday. The afterglow of the setting sun appeared beneath the lake of divine power. It was very beautiful. Setting sun sharing afterglow. Thank you, brothers, for your support. I'm really trying my best to update. I'll make up for what I owe later. Thank you. End of chapter. The number of experts surpassed that of the Eternals. When the second anima arrived, The number of experts on the human side completely surpassed that of the Eternals. Leng Qing and Eiji rushed towards the roots of the Black Mother Tree, wanting to help Lu Yin. However, they stopped when they saw the Divine Power Lake. Once they entered, not only would they not be able to fight, but they would also be affected by the divine power. Underground, Elder Chan, Leng Qing, and Xia Shenji walked out from the Divine Seal Catalog and rushed towards Bai Xianer. Lu Yin wanted to see what kind of ancestral world this lotus vine was. The three progenitors rushed into the lotus vine's ancestral world, but they all dissipated into golden light. Lu Yin's expression changed. What's this? Bai Xianer looked up, and the lotus vine expanded once more, isolating the divine power lake as it approached Lu Yin. Lu Yin quickly released the starry sky in his heart to contend with the lotus vine. The lotus vine was actually able to dissolve the Divine Seal Catalog's power, which was something Lu Yin hadn't expected. In my ancestral world, no power can approach, including the laws of the sequence. Bai Xianer's voice was cold. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. Wasn't this similar to the laws of the primordial realm? Bai Xianer's ancestral world was actually so domineering? The starry sky in his heart isolated spacetime, and the lotus vine also isolated the divine power lake. One could absorb any power and turn it into a star, while the other could prevent any power from approaching. One absorbed and the other repelled. The two forces collided at the roots of the Black Mother Tree, constantly shaking the second zone of calamity and even affecting the other zones. In the zone of calamity, waves of power surged into the sky from the collision underground. How long had it taken for Lu Yin to form the starry sky in his heart? How much power had he cultivated? How many opportunities had he obtained? Bai Xianer's lotus vine was just her ancestral world, but it was already comparable to the starry sky in Lu Yin's heart. He now understood why the starry sky in his heart didn't affect Bai Xianer. It was because Bai Xianer's tyrannical nature allowed her to ignore the starry sky in her heart. They were two complete opposites. The two opposing forces constantly collided, shaking spacetime. The commotion was no less than the battle between Lu Yuan and the ancient gods. Tianxi looked down at the ground, his eyes filled with shock and doubt. This Lu Yin had to be eliminated. Once Lu Yin matured, even Tianxi might not be his opponent. It was unbelievable that a mere half-progenitor could possess such power. Lu Yin was shocked by Bai Xianer's lotus vine, but Bai Xianer was even more shocked by the starry sky in Lu Yin's heart. After all, Lu Yin hadn't become a half-progenitor yet. He had 4 inner worlds, and with the starry sky in his heart, no one knew what the future held. Bai Xianer and Lu Yin were separated by 2 worlds. They looked at each other, speechless. They wanted to kill each other, and they had to kill each other at this moment. The lotus vine bloomed. It was the immortal radish flower. Lu Yin's eyelids twitched. It was the immortal radish flower again. Could it be that the flower's ability to numb the nerves, drain energy and explode flower powder wasn't its ultimate power? Then what power did the immortal radish flower have? As the immortal radish flowers bloomed, Bai Xianer stepped out of the lotus vine's ancestral world and walked towards the starry sky in Lu Yin's heart. The moment she stepped in, the stars around her rotated. Bai Xianer saw many stars, continents, oceans and divine power. She saw too many things. The more she saw, the more shocked she was. Who could gather so much power? What kind of person could cultivate all of this power? What kind of shocking scene would it be? She had seen everything from the past to the present, and she couldn't help but be shocked by Lu Yin. Lu Yin stared at Bai Xianer, raised his hand and punched out. She wanted to fight him head-on. Bai Xianer looked up and raised her hand as well. Her palm was still white and tender, but it gave Lu Yin an unimaginable feeling of power. He had transformed. Boom. The fist and palm collided and Lu Yin was forced to retreat. He had lost in terms of strength. Bai Xianer raised her hand and pressed down on Lu Yin. Lu Yin used the extreme reversal technique and an infinite inner world appeared. The lines of power collided, causing a second injury. He punched at Bai Xianer again. Bai Xianer struck out again. There was another loud collision and Lu Yin was forced back. He had lost again. Impossible, Bai Xianer couldn't suppress him in terms of strength. It was the lotus vine, the immortal radish flowers. Lu Yin looked past Bai Xianer and towards the lotus vine's ancestral world in the distance. He looked at the blooming immortal radish flowers on the vine. The immortal radish flowers' true use wasn't to numb the nerves, explode into powder or drain energy. Its true use was to absorb energy. The lotus vine didn't just repel all energy. It could repel and even absorb energy. It could absorb all energy in a domineering manner. This was the true power of the lotus vine. Lu Yin thought back to the scene in the botanical garden. Aside from the lotus vine, all the other plants on the ground had withered, their nutrients absorbed by the vine. This was the true power of the lotus vine. Xianxia sent a palm strike at Lu Yin and he struggled to block it. His strength was suppressed and each palm strike broke his bones and broke his tendons. He used his palm realm battle force, his stars, his cosmic art and even his divine power, but it was all useless. In the previous battle, Xianxia had absorbed too much of his strength with the lotus vine. She was suppressing him with brute force, and with her own strength he couldn't do anything even though they were in the void of space. Kanyang. The beautiful afterglow sprinkled down, but Xianxia was unharmed. She was relying on brute force, not martial arts. Lu Yin attacked with his consciousness, even if it meant his consciousness planet would crack again. It was still useless. Xianxia had no openings. She looked at the cracked consciousness planet. So that's how it is. As long as I break your stars, your strength will disappear, right, Brother Zhou Xian? Lu Yin's pupils shrank, and he used the death transformation without hesitation. Death energy entered his body as he used the hook in his right hand and the shield in his left. Xianxia said coldly, "So what if the death god himself is here? He can't beat me. The death god is just a disciple of absolute beginning." With that she grabbed the chain and it shattered with a bang. Facing the hook's attack, she punched out. Her small fist not only shattered the hook but also the shield. Compared to the death god's strength, you're stronger. Brother Zhou Xian, you're finished. Xianxia appeared on the continent in the void of space in his heart. She looked up and saw stars connected to the continent, and above the continent was an ocean of astral sources. She pressed down with one hand and a huge tree rose from the ground. It was a lotus vine. Xianxia moved her ancestral world directly into the void of space in Lu Yin's heart. She wanted to use the overbearing nature of the lotus vine to absorb Lu Yin's strength and destroy it. Originally she just wanted to get rid of Lu Yin, but after seeing the power in the void of space in his heart, she had other ideas. She wanted to steal Lu Yin's strength. With the overbearing nature of the lotus vine she could do it. Brother Zhou Xian, thank you for helping me. Xianxia smiled at Lu Yin again. Chapter 32:13. Lu Yin clutched his shoulder in embarrassment, but when Xianxia smiled at him he smiled back. Sister Xian, I have to thank you as well. Xianxia froze. Lu Yin's smile made her feel uneasy, but she didn't know why. She was clearly suppressing him. The lotus tree grew and began to absorb the energy of the land and even the space around Lu Yin's heart. Lu Yin took out something else. Myriad species. This was something that Nong Lai had given him to plant in the botanical garden. Lu Yin hadn't planted it back then because he had some memories of it, even if he didn't know that it was Lu Xiaoxian. Nong Lai had said that everyone grew different plants, and the same plants would grow the same no matter how many times they planted them. Lu Yin was afraid that Nong Lai would find out about his identity, so he changed the topic. Myriad species had always been stored in his cosmic ring. Myriad species was just a seed, and if it was planted in the botanical garden, it would only be recognized by Nong Lai. However, that might not be the case if he had planted it on the land near his heart. He remembered that while the lotus tree was tyrannical and absorbed all the nutrients in its surroundings, causing other plants to wither, there was one stalk of grass that had always thrived. Not only had it not withered, it had even grown better with the nourishment of the lotus tree. It was living a very nourishing life. That grass had been planted by him. If there was a stalk of grass in the botanical garden, then there could also be a stalk of grass in the space around his heart. Lu Yin let go and the myriad species fell to the ground. The lotus tree began to absorb all the energy around it, and at the same time the myriad species cracked and the ground trembled. Then a crisp green stalk of grass rose from the ground, bringing with it soil with it. It was just like the weeds on the side of the road that would be flattened with a casual step. It looked rustic. However, this stalk of grass danced in the lotus tree's direction, as if it was cheering and jumping for joy. The tyrannical lotus tree and the beautiful celestial radish flowers wanted to take over this space. Xianxia stood under the lotus tree as beautiful as a painting. But at this moment her eyes were filled with disbelief as she looked at the little grass. It was such a simple and fragile little grass, yet it was dancing in the wind. The surrounding energy that had been absorbed by the lotus vines had already formed a vortex. The closed vortex was enough to occupy this part of the starry sky, but the vortex couldn't close no matter what because there was a little grass there. Gradually the grass grew taller. Although it still looked so delicate and fragile, it gave people a feeling of exuberant vitality. And with little grass as the center, the forcefully absorbed energy from this part of the starry sky circled around the lotus vines and returned to the starry sky, as if it were playing a game. How can this be? Xianxia couldn't understand why this would happen. Lu Yin landed on the continent and stood beside Xiao. This continent belonged to him and it would only acknowledge him. Everything that formed on this continent should belong to him. If the lotus tree vine wanted to seize power, its foundation was also on this piece of land. In that case, if the grass took root on the land, it would also succeed. The same scene played out in the botanical garden once again, but this time the process had been sped up countless times. The tyrannical lotus vines had helped the little grass grow, and it could also return the energy to its original location in space at Lu Yin's will. Xianxia's plan completely failed. Not only that, but Xiao wasn't too far away from the lotus tree vine's ancestral world. At this moment, it was equivalent to destroying the foundation of Xianxia's ancestral world. Although it wasn't enough to completely destroy Xianxia's ancestral world, it was still useful for now. Not anymore. The celestial radish flowers withered and the lotus tree vines disappeared. Xianxia calmly stood on the continent and looked at the grass in front of her. He was lost in thought. The noblest flower was destroyed by a weed. Perhaps this is the law of the universe. The universe doesn't have a limit. If it does reach a certain limit, then the thing that breaks it is the most insignificant thing. The universe is a circle. Her gaze swept past Xiao and landed on Lu Yin. She smiled beautifully. I understand now, Brother Zhou Xian. Thank you. Lu Yin didn't know what she understood. Her improvement was equivalent to his regression. Did you just say that the universe is a circle? Xianxia's beautiful smile was unforgettable. Yes, Brother Zhou Xian. If you don't die today, remember that the universe is a circle. Her entire aura changed and the stars trembled. Lu Yin's hair stood on end, and he subconsciously put away the stars in his heart. Xianxia stepped on a time node and flashed over. She pointed a finger at him. This finger was like the finger he had dreamed of countless times after he lost his memories. It was this finger that seemed ordinary, like a celestial guiding the way, but it brought him an indescribable sense of danger. Lu Yin didn't plan to block it and retreated in reverse. At the same time, a solid ground appeared in the direction he was about to retreat. Lu Yin was confused. Where did the ground come from? Crack. The ground shattered and Lu Yin's legs collided uncontrollably. His left leg collided with his right, causing him to fall down. Above his head, Xianxia descended, her white fingertips closing in on him. Lu Yin waved his hand, setting Sunday. It was still a concept battle technique. Xianxia's eyes were blank and she had forgotten everything. She had forgotten about martial arts in advance, but her body still maintained inertia. Her finger pierced through Lu Yin's shoulder. Lu Yin had suffered many broken bones in his previous battle with Xianxia. Now that he was pierced through by her finger, his entire right arm couldn't move. The small boat shuttled back and forth for a second. Inexplicably, a river appeared around the boat. Lu Yin was shocked. When did a river appear in his light? Before he could think any further, the river shattered and the light disappeared. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. Xianxia had broken through his inner world. In a battle of time power, Lu Yin knew that there were very few people who were stronger than him. Back then, Windmaster had been able to expand time, but he had still been traversed by the small boat. Out of all the experts he had met, only an unstoppable existence like the one true God could suppress him in terms of time power. The streamer boat could devour time that could not be contained in the river of time, and any expert with the power of time could not use it in the river of time. This led to the streamer boat being the nemesis of any power of time. But today the small boat had been broken through in a way that Lu Yin couldn't understand. Although he didn't understand how Xianxia had broken through the small boat, he was very clear that this had to be a sequence law. Not only had Xianxia silently reached the progenitor realm, but she had also reached the level of a sequence law. She wasn't as simple as Xianxia, she was also the undying god's daughter. the one who had existed since ancient times. The one who had given forefather Tianyi a paper cut. Lu Yin quickly retreated, but land appeared under his feet once again. When the land shattered, the reverse step also became disorderly. However, because he had the experience of tripping once, he was prepared. This time, Lu Yin was prepared and didn't fall, but the reverse step had been broken through. Bai Xianer appeared from the side, tearing open a wound on Lu Yin's body. Blood flowed out, causing the fixed divine power lake to become even redder. Strength, speed, battle techniques, even spiritual force, domain and consciousness, Lu Yin attacked time and time again, but they were all broken through. His tendons and bones were broken and his body was covered in wounds. Bai Xianer was like a ruler looking down from above, seeing through all of his techniques and breaking through them. Lu Yin couldn't resist at all. Ever since Lu Yin killed Windmaster in the Mirage domain, he didn't believe that there was anyone in the universe who could completely suppress him apart from primordial realm experts. But at this moment, Bai Xianer had completely defeated him. No matter what he did, he couldn't stop her. Most of his body was covered in blood, and the immortal radish flowers were still blooming and dancing. Lu Yin's strength was still there, but he no longer had a body that could withstand it. His body was constantly injured and even the reversal of time was broken through. With a loud bang, Bai Xianer pushed the general appointment platform towards Lu Yin with a single palm. Lu Yin spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Bai Xianer displayed unimaginable strength at this moment. Even in the 3 pillars and 6 seas, there were very few who could fight against her. My sequence principle is a vessel that carries everything. Everything needs a vessel. A drop of water needs a river, an ocean, a living creature needs space, land, and even the void itself needs a universe that is constantly expanding. This is a sequence principle. Your power is no exception. All power needs a vessel. I can materialize the vessel that carries your power and then break it to break your technique. Brother Zhou Xian, can you resist a sequence principle like this? Lu Yin panted heavily as blood dyed the surroundings red. He looked at Bai Xianer in the distance with bitterness. There was actually a sequence principle like this? No wonder even the reversal of time could be broken. As long as it was a creature that lived in this universe, who could break free from the sequence principle. At the same time, Yingdu's mecha shattered on the second battlefield. As an expert of the Limitless Empire's Optimus Prime, he possessed the 12-ring Limitless Mecha's agony and was qualified to fight against a sequence law adept. Yet he had died under Ancestor Shi's sword. Not only him but everyone in the Second Calamity region battlefield had suffered Ancestor Shi's essence, energy and soul sword in an instant. The Qing Luo sword had displayed terrifying strength. Kong Tianzhao knelt on one knee and gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. A long gash had almost cut him in half. Jiang Feng wanted to help, but Tianxi's strength had already surpassed Jiang Feng's, so he couldn't do anything. The ancestor looked at Kong Tianzhao. Your talent in the sword Dao is the best I've ever seen. If you had more time, you might have been able to reach my level in the future. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. He raised his sword. No one around could help Kong Tianzhao. Although the Eternals had fewer experts than the humans, the primordial realm experts couldn't be relieved because of the Guardians. Kong Tianzhao looked up at the ancestor calmly. Death was something he had wanted to face for a long time. This day should have come long ago. Just as the ancestor was about to slash down, he paused and his expression changed. Those who were familiar with the ancestor knew that his expression rarely changed, but at this moment, it changed drastically because he smelled something terrifying. It was an unimaginable stench. Chapter 32:14. The smelly object flew towards Ancestor Shi from Su Wei. The heavenly hound ran around the battlefield with its tail between its legs. Su Wei chased after it with a laugh and arrived at Ancestor Shi's side. Stupid dog, come on. Aren't you good at taking a beating? Come on, let's fight to the death. Su Wei was excited. He had been hit by the heavenly hound in the endless battlefield and had broken many of his bones. He couldn't beat the dog no matter how hard he tried. The opportunity had finally come. The moment the smelly object appeared, the heavenly hound ran away with its tail between its legs. This feeling was great. Ancestor Shi frowned and slashed at Su Wei. With a bang, fragments of a turtle shell appeared in the distance from Su Wei. It was from Su Master. Su Master reminded him, "Be careful, this is a battlefield." Su Wei was scared. He was almost killed by Ancestor Shi's sword. Far away in the corner of the second disaster zone, Di Qiong and Wu Tian were facing each other. Their eyes were deep and scary as they looked at each other. Why didn't you leave? Di Qiong gritted his teeth and asked. This was what he couldn't figure out. In his hand, the long spear shone with cold light as the martial god scripture rotated around it. Wu Tian was also holding a long spear that was exactly the same as Di Qiong's. Why? Did I hurt your pride by not leaving the third disaster zone? Di Qiong's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Not only did you not leave but you also recovered from your dying state. Wu Tian, what are you planning? Wu Tian shook his head. I just want to hide at your place. If you want to know I can tell you before you die. Dying. Do you really think I can't kill you? Di Qiong laughed maniacally. He stomped on the ground causing it to shatter. He rushed towards Wu Tian with his long spear. Wu Tian looked up. Do you know why I took away my sky eye? Because I don't need it anymore. As he spoke he also stabbed with his long spear. The sounds of metal clashing could be heard as the spears clashed against each other. They were like two flashes of light flashing across the land of the zone of disaster. The area they covered grew larger and larger, and the shockwaves continued to spread into the distance. The void, the land, and everything that could be seen with the naked eye were sliced apart until the shockwaves reached the Black Mother Tree. On the Black Mother Tree's trunk, countless black lines burned, and golden light shone from Lu Tianyi. This was the battlefield between Lu Tianyi and He Wuxian. The aftermath of the battle between Di Qiong and Wu Tian spread out. He Wuxian looked over and said, Di Qiong is in danger. Wu Tian did not leave the third region of calamity. He was on the brink of death, but he managed to recover in an instant. He must have some ulterior motive for leaving behind such a powerful trump card. Lu Tianyi stared at Black Wuxian. You still don't want to expose yourself? Black Wuxian shook his head. I've said it before. It's too early. You've underestimated the Eternals. This battle won't yield any results. Let's take care of the 4 Guardian envoys first. Far away, blood splattered everywhere. It was Wu Tian. He tore open Di Qiong's wrist and used his long spear to cut off 3 of Di Qiong's fingers. He turned around and stabbed with his long spear again. He paused for a second time. This action would be recorded in Di Qiong's martial god scripture, and repeated actions would be ineffective against Di Qiong. Di Qiong swept his long spear and tore open Wu Tian's abdomen. Blood splattered everywhere. However, in the next moment he paused as well. This was because Wu Tian's ancestral world was also based on the martial god scripture. There shouldn't be 2 identical ancestral worlds in the universe. However, Di Qiong and Wu Tian's ancestral worlds were exactly the same. Both of them were surrounded by pages of scriptures that recorded their opponents' every move and style. Any repeated moves would be useless. If anyone were to watch the intense battle between the 2 of them, it would be extremely uncomfortable. The battle seemed smooth but there would always be pauses and they would switch to another attack. They were the most familiar with the way they fought and they thought that it was smooth. Di Qiong had more injuries than Wu Tian. Wu Tian taught humans how to use weapons in the primitive space. He had the means to break all kinds of weapons. Although he had lost his sky eye, he didn't need it. If Di Qiong wasn't extremely strong, he wouldn't have been able to hurt him. As time went by, Di Qiong's injuries would only increase. Di Qiong knew that, so he used the sequence rules dome. All of Wu Tian's killing moves were under Di Qiong's feet. Di Qiong was high above and he stabbed his long spear from above. Wu Tian raised his head and looked at the approaching long spear. He also stabbed with his long spear. Di Qiong sneered as if he was looking down at a king. Sparks flew as the 2 long spears collided. The void was distorted and the void world was split open. Di Qiong's long spear was about to pierce Wu Tian's forehead. At this moment, Di Qiong's pupils suddenly shrank as he saw an eye appear between Wu Tian's eyebrows. Sky eye? Impossible. Di Qiong spat out a mouthful of blood. He lowered his head as Wu Tian's long spear pierced his heart and lifted him up. At this moment, Di Qiong was still higher than Wu Tian, but he was lifted up by Wu Tian's long spear. If you like to look at me from above, then so be it. Di Qiong's eyes flickered and his face turned pale. Sky eye? Wu Tian looked up at Di Qiong and said, This is the rule, the way to educate all living things. Do you think it's just the past? Wrong. That's my rule. I can enlighten all living things. Right and wrong I can decide with a single word. Your rule under the dome is wrong. Humans can't stay in the dome forever. Di Qiong looked at Wu Tian blankly and laughed bitterly. I see. After so many years I thought that your sequence rules had been worn down. Turns out that this is your sequence rules. Destroying the original sequence rules and reorganizing them is the 3 realms and 6 Dao. But I won't be defeated so easily. Di Qiong growled and divine power surged out of his body. He used the eyeless transformation and grabbed Wu Tian's long spear. Crack! Di Qiong exerted his strength and the long spear broke. Wu Tian raised his eyebrows. Di Qiong had taken away a lot of his power over the years, and used it to grow into one of the 3 masters and 6 heroes. He was called the Dark Warrior Sky, but that was not right. The real reason why Di Qiong was called the Dark Warrior Sky was because of the Corpse King transformation. He was the creator of the Corpse King transformation. If he only wanted to learn his own power, he would not be taken seriously by the one true God. It was because of the Corpse King transformation that Di Qiong became one of the 3 masters and 6 heroes, and the Dark Warrior Sky who could compete with him. With a whoosh, Di Qiong attacked Wu Tian with his palm. His palm's strength broke the ground of the zone of disaster and went deep into the ground. Wu Tian sighed. It would not be easy to defeat this person. On the other side in the sky, the immemorial Thunder Locust wanted to find trouble with Jiang Feng, but it was stopped by the Desolate Ancestor. The Desolate Ancestor did not fight with the immemorial Thunder Locust. He grabbed the immemorial Thunder Locust's tail and let the lightning strike him, but he did not move. Many people were shocked. The Desolate Ancestor was too strong, and even the Thunder Lord did not want to bear the power of the lightning. Heavenly Lord Victor laughed wildly. This was the Desolate Ancestor. He fought his way into the zone of disaster alone, and he did not die even after facing the one true God. Even when he left with serious injuries and was chased by the butterfly, he did not die. The Desolate Ancestor might not be the strongest, but he was definitely the most durable. His endurance was almost exaggerated. Light shone on the ground and covered the area. The grass was green and Beauty Mavis was struggling to resist the butterfly. She was pulled into a dream from time to time. If not for her strong sequence rules, she would not have been able to resist it. The Desolate Ancestor exclaimed, "You blocked me as an ancestor. You're really powerful. Humans are too stubborn." Beauty Mavis gritted her teeth. Behind her, the Mavis Divine Tree kept growing. Humans are not worthy of being judged by animals like you. Filthy words. Although I represent the heavens and am not good at killing, you humans will pay the price for your ignorance and stupidity today. The butterfly flapped its wings and a gust of wind swept past. Most of it was blocked by the Mavis Divine Tree, but there was still a gust of wind that swept past the Mavis Divine Tree and blew onto Dual Blade by Xing Wenhuan and Air Ji. The 5 of them maintained their fighting posture and were rooted to the ground. Then Bai Xing fell to the ground. His staff fell from his hand and his eyes were filled with bitterness. In the end he had died on the battlefield. Then Wenhuan fell. He was one of the 5 elders under the Archer God of the 5th Zone of Disaster. He was a master of sequence rules, but he could not withstand the butterfly's wings. Dual Blade's skin started to corrode. The pink-haired woman was terrified. "Brother, brother, wee." The blue-haired man hugged the pink-haired woman. "Don't be afraid. Brother is here." The pink-haired woman hugged the blue-haired man tightly and cried. "Brother, are we going to die?" "It's okay. Brother will protect you." As they spoke, the corrosion on their skin worsened. Rust spots appeared. It was very strange that rust appeared on a human's body. However, Dual Blade was not a human but a blade. "Brother, I'm scared." "Don't be afraid. Brother is here. No matter where you go, brother will be by your side." "Thank you, brother. I'm dragging you down again." "It's okay. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." As they whispered, their eyes gradually closed and their bodies dissipated. Finally, 2 rusty blades appeared on the ground of the zone of disaster. One was completely blue. Before the corrosion, one could see that it was extremely dazzling. The other was pink. It was very beautiful. However, as the rust corroded, it gradually withered and finally turned into dust. Only the hilts were left, stacked together. Not far away, Air Ji smiled bitterly. She had lived a carefree life. She did not expect to die with 2 blades. She looked into the distance and saw Calamity, her eldest son. Life well. The expedition of disaster was not afraid of death. She had lived a life of luxury and her time was up. Even if she did not die on this battlefield, she would only live for a few more years. She had helped Lu Yin not only because of Mr. Mu. The favor that Mr. Mu had given them had been repaid the first time they had fought for the 9-star civilization. She was doing this for the expedition of disaster. The expedition of disaster could not be like this forever, wandering between pleasure and death. The more people came into contact with it, the more their thoughts would change. Who did not want to cultivate well and live a little longer? Actually, many people had already escaped from the expedition of disaster. Erji hoped that one day, Lu Yin would reach an unprecedented height and resolve Ancestor Ekka's madness. She hoped that the expedition of disaster would return to normal. Many years had passed and every generation of leaders had been searching for such a person. She saw this hope in Lu Yin. One day Lu Yin would do it. Otherwise, why would an expedition of disaster that had accepted death join the above heaven sect? Calamity, my son, lead the expedition of disaster well and follow the above heaven sect. One day you will be free. Erji slowly collapsed.